So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if Naruto had Kaguya as his slave and went to high school DxD? Movie 2. The red eyes of Kurama slowly opened and blinked away the hazy vision that plagued. A groan escaped the red-haired yokai's lips as feeling was brought back to his body. It turned into a small hiss, feeling the awful ache that ravaged his entire body. Even after 12 years with a real body, pain was still new to him, and Kurama was sure the amount he felt was as bad as one of Naruto's episodes with his chakra. Every part of his body stung, and all of his muscles so unbearably sore. In times like this, Kurama missed his former body because at least being a mass of chakra prevented him feeling all these complicated pains. Damn flesh bodies and their fleshy weakness, Kurama grumbled in his head. Anyo, you're finally awake, Kurama ni-san, spoke a familiar, flirty voice. Kurama snapped his eyes to his far right, finding a mop of blue hair with strands of black. Underneath was the pretty face of Matabi, giving Kurama a smirk with her twinkling heterochromatic eyes of yellow and blue. She had not changed much over the years since Kurama had finally reunited with the last of his siblings that lived to be reincarnated. The only thing really not worthy since then was that Matabi had grown in height and she grew her hair to reach her lower back. Life for her has been involved of becoming the next head of the Nekosho and the new priestess to the Shinto death god, Shinigami. In fact, the last Kurama heard was that, according to Matabi, she was trying to create a new type of legendary swords to rival the many mythological blades that are famed throughout the supernatural world. Something to do with souls. But Kurama had little care for such details, unlike right now. Matabi, what are you doing here? Kurama asked, his voice hoarse. Shinigami was in a bit of a panic all of a sudden when we both felt your spike of chakra as if you were going into one of your hissy fits. Matabi explained. Imagine my surprise that you got your butt handed to you but a god named Asura. I have to say, I never thought someone like that existed at all in this dimension. I don't think even Father or Kaguya would have stood a chance against him. Why did you fight someone like him? Kurama scowled. Hey, he was the one that threw the first punch. And I had him on the ropes. Kurama, you were very bad at lying. Matabi deadpanned, all sort of humor gone. I was there in time to watch you throw both a Rasen Shuriken and a Rasenrozu, and they did nothing. I wasn't beaten that bad, Kurama mumbled. Ni-san, you were manhandled into the ground. Matabi said. You were out for several hours, and even Shukaku was so worried about you. Hours? Exclaimed Kurama. Shukaku being worried? It really came as a surprise to Kurama that he was knocked out for so long. His healing factor on a normal occasion would have the yokai conscious even before the first hour. Then there was Shukaku being worried for him. One would think the Tanuki would be jumping in joy, but apparently Asura had beaten him so bad that it upset his little brother. What's next? The moon was falling from orbit. Kurama tried to get up but felt his body weighed down by a foreign object laid out over his unchecked left side. His eyes moved to find the nuisance and remove it, but his body completely stopped on the familiar shade of blonde hair. For a few seconds, Kurama was a bit put off of the sight of Yasaka resting her head across Kurama's stomach and holding his left hand. He could hear soft snores of sleep exhale from the blonde kitsune as her face was set in a perfectly serene expression. However, that was marred by the tears marks on her pink cheeks. Poor girl. Cooed Matabi with a smirk. The little cutie refused to leave your side when you were brought in here. She was awfully worried sick for you. Coo. It's so adorable, don't you think, Kurama ni-san? Ni-san? Kurama couldn't respond at the moment as words failed to leave his throat that went a little dry at the sight of Yasaka. It was still so alien to him that anyone other than Naruto would actually be concerned from him. Yet, Yasaka has proven her worth to Kurama as a devoted throughout the years and still counting. Unknown to himself, a little pink dusted his cheeks. You really are amazing, Yasaka-chan, thought Kurama. Cocoon. Mumbled Yasaka as her eyelids quivered slightly, snuggling her face into her resting spot. Era. Chuckled Matabi behind her hand. Kurama's left brow twitched. I fail to see how this is funny. To me, it is extremely entertaining, Matabi said. Their ears suddenly perked up to the acute sound of feet walking over wooden floorboard beyond the room. The mischief on Matabi's face lessened to a simple smile as her heterochromatic eyes looked to the only entrance into the medical ward. As the paper doors slid open, the Shinto goddess of the sun, Amaterasu, made her entrance, her presence itself giving a slight warmth to the room. Matabi stepped at the foot of the bed for the goddess to have a full view of the Nekosho, and the reincarnated Nibi Biju gave a deep formal bow. However, her own footsteps were accompanied by another set that had a heavier force to them. The source could not hide himself as the very god that beat the stuffing out of Kurama, the strongest god Asura. Matabi stiffened as her more spiritual senses as a Nekosho made her feel as if she were drowning in mud from the overwhelming presence the Hindu god gave off. Kurama did not take Matabi's reaction lightly, as anyone that could upset the Nibi Biju as such was an extremely dangerous entity, and he already knew firsthand the moment Asura walked unscathed by a Rasen shuriken. Amaterasu eyed the bed-ridden Kurama, her features softening in relief. A knowing smile spread across her beautiful features seeing Yusaka asleep over her fellow friend while still holding his hand. She had tried earlier to get Yusaka away to give Kurama better rest, but her surrogate daughter was extra stubborn to stay with her cocoon. Her heart honestly could not stop the girl. They just look so precious, Amaterasu thought. It's wonderful to see you again, Amaterasu-sama, Matabi greeted as she lifted her hand. Amaterasu waved it off. It is of no need for that, Matabi-chan. I am just here to make sure my lovely kitsune boy was doing fine, and that a certain dumbskull needs to give some words. It's not that big of a deal, Asura said. Come on, the kid looks perfectly fine. Amaterasu glared at her crush. Kurama-kun would have been fine if you didn't throw your fists at him, now tell him you're sorry. Asura sighed in exasperation. Fine. Matabi slightly shuddered in worry as Asura's intense presence came closer to the Biju. She had enough sense to walk out the way, but found herself forgetting to blink. Kurama held up better already used to the god's aura, even if it wasn't coming close to what was really hiding inside the divine body of the Hindu god of justice. Kid, sorry for putting you through all that. Asura apologized as honestly as he could. You just had a lot of potential that drew my curiosity, and I wanted to see it for myself. Frankly, I am impressed. Kurama's brows twitched in barely hidden irritation. He called getting thrashed around impressive. The reincarnated Biju could hardly move as he was right now, even with his healing factor. I am afraid that isn't going to cut it, Amaterasu said sharply. Please care to enlighten us why you punched Kurama-kun in more detail. Asura sighed. Fine. I'll be blunt when I say this. You, kid, have very dangerous potential. There is malice in you that needs to be tamed, and right now I am looking forward to being teacher. This was surprising, and Kurama showed it with the rising of his brows. When he first got punched by Asura, the kitsune thought he was being picked on. He didn't expect that Asura was perhaps testing him, much less considering actually training him. How was he supposed to figure it out anyway? You have a strange way of showing it, Kurama bluntly said with a growling undertone. Asura chuckled. You're brutally honest. I am starting to like you more, kid. Kurama-kun, I'd accept Asura's offer, Amaterasu said, getting surprised looks from the Matabi and Kurama. You have to understand that no one has ever given the privilege to be taught by Asura, and I do believe his teachings will do you very good. He will help you with your difficulties of senjutsu. Cocoon, I also think you should accept this, Matabi said. I mean, this does seem a big deal. There's only so much you can do by yourself, but a teacher can do so much more for you. As much as Kurama wanted to brush it off, he couldn't deny the golden opportunity that was given to him. Everything that Kurama has achieved in both skill and power was only based off of memory from his life as a sealed Biju. Truly, he should thank that his memory was still intact to properly copy even some of the sword styles Kushina used in her life, but he had no set fighting style beyond his own instincts, whereas a teacher would be able to hone them better. He was still trying to get used to how to properly use his new body to its fullest extent. The more appealing factor was that he would be taught by a god of wrath, as in an entity who has mastered in controlling volatile amounts of rage and malice. Asura had promised Kurama to temper that malice as well as training to his fullest potential. He needed this training if Kurama ever hoped to use senjutsu without the malice of the world enhancing his own and be consumed by the whole flood of it. If it weren't for Asura, Kurama would have become a danger to everyone for miles around him before his siblings had the chance to stop him. In that time he could have severely or, kami forbid, kill Yusaka by accident. Kurama refused to ever let that happen. So what do you say, Kurama? Asura said, finally remembering the kitsune's name, will you accept to be my student for the time being? I accept. Kurama agreed, with just a hint of reluctance. Asura smirked. Good, you will have to come with me back to India at midday tomorrow. Kurama hitched his breath in surprise. While he wasn't that bothered of leaving, it brought up the question why he had to leave to train. Just what did he sign up for? What? Amaterasu and Matabi exclaimed in alarm. What? But none were more vocal to this shocking news than Yasaka. The mere mention of Kurama leaving his home, especially away from her, summoned a nightmare in within her sleep as she comforted Cocoon. Simple words that brought untold terror in Yasaka's heart. She bolted awake in a frantic haze. Upon awakening, Yasaka immediately looked for Kurama, softening significantly on sight on her crush. Those golden orbs locked on the source of the voice that was Asura. Her fear grew knowing it was almost impossible to have Kurama stay with her if Asura of all people wanted to take the Crimson Kitsune with him. Asura-kun, could you please elaborate why you are taking Kurama-kun away from his home? Amaterasu said in a deathly sweet tone that makes men of all races quiver in fear. Asura was far more than a man as he met the sun goddess' gaze. Tell me, Amaterasu. Do you have any idea of the boy's potential? Did you feel what he was capable of in that valley? I don't plan to give some simple things as fighting stances or anything like that. I've only seen his sword in the two super devils. No, I plan to bring the maximum potential he is capable of, including having him conquer his own demons. From we've seen, those demons can be quite destructive. But I can keep him contained if he goes on this so-called rampage, Amaterasu argued. He's my responsibility, one of my children. She's really going to make me do that, huh? Asura thought. Forgive me, Amaterasu. Like Tamamo was? Asura rebutted. All of Amaterasu's features froze at the mention of her name. One of her beloved children many centuries ago, and the last child of Inari. Yasaka took a step back as an oppressive aura filled the room as if the sun itself entered the room. Light without source burned the shadows away and hot winds blew through the room. Only Matabi and Kurama weren't so reactive to the aura, but there was a noticeable expression of nervousness. She was a god after all, and just a small percentage of her power surpassed that of any cage from the elemental nations. Don't you dare do that to me! Amaterasu hissed with tears brimming in her eyes. Her heart was broken. She was hurt, and I didn't want to do it. Kurama is not like her. He is exactly like her, Asura said, pointing to Kurama. That raw potential and malice. I've seen the same in that Kitsune girl long ago, and perhaps he's even worse than that. He couldn't go into Senjutsu without succumbing to that malice, and we both know how much raw destruction that can cause if he's anything like Tamamo. You really think you can stop whatever damage if he loses it? That's why I am bringing him with me, so I keep an eye on him to stop any of his rampages and make sure he doesn't accidentally blow up a human country or two. Blowing up a human nation. Hey! Kurama thought, remembering some memories where he launched tailed beast bombs on humans. Those were the days. So you see, Kura Asura continued. No, his words were unexpectedly cut off by the high-pitched scream that reverberated throughout the entire room. Kurama felt lithe arms wrap around his shoulder and hug him too tightly to a soft body. He gasped for breath from the sudden hold, but his words were stopped by the perpetrator herself. Yasaka was hugging him close to her body as tight as she could with tears streaming down her face. Please, Yasaka begged as she sobbed. Please don't take Cocoon away. I don't want my Cocoon to go. I want him to stay with me forever. Yasaka, please, this is for his own good. Amaterasu tried to coax her daughter. No, cried Yasaka. Yasaka. Kurama spoke that ended in a gurgled scream as Yasaka tightened her hug even more. Ow, ow, ow. Why? Kurama thought with the pain racking his already sore body. Why the hell is she so damn strong like this? If it weren't for his dense chakra running throughout his body, Kurama was sure his own bones would turn to paste by now. He knew Yasaka meant well, but he didn't want the girl to accidentally kill him. With the effort that lingered in his body, he turned his neck to the right side where Matabi stood for help, only for the Nekosho to already stare at him with a shit-eating grin. Matabi, help me here, hissed Kurama, cut off with some chokes for air. Coo. Matabi chuckled. For shame, Kurama-ni-san. You're so cruel for making a girl cry like this. Ooh, when I get my giant form back, The first I am going to do is stomp you into a pancake. Kurama seethed in his head. It would be a long while from this incident that Kurama would realize he could have used his 9 tails to dislodge Yusaka off of him. Unfortunately, pain has a way of making people, even as someone is a reincarnated Biju, to forget certain things. Listen, girl, you can't just. This is more complicated than that, Asura said, his features becoming tense. The Hindu god did not want to have such a situation as this. He was strongest being on the planet, excluding beast-class entities and the true dragons. But one thing Asura always found himself in a hard spot was crying children. He knew Kurama was different than some children should be, but Asura simply did not know how to handle when a child cries, especially if he is the indirect cause of it. Would you just stop crying? Asura muttered in an irritated growl. Asura-kun, Amaterasu said as she settled a hand on the god's shoulder, we need to give them time. You have to understand that they are very close. Gru. Asura growled before turning towards the exit. Fine. I'll wait later for the boy's answer once he talks to his friends. Of course. Amaterasu preened with her usual warm smile, then she glanced to the Kitsune duo. You two settle this, all right? I'll go and prepare some dinner for you and our guests. The god and goddess walked out of the medical ward, leaving the 3 yokai alone together. Matabi took one glance at the Kitsune pair on the bed, her features softening at the sight of Yusaka clinging to Kurama like a lifeline. She smiled, showing a rare softness to them from the Nekosho, and knew that Yusaka was going to do good for her brother. I think I'll leave you two alone for now, Matabi said, lacking any of her teasing as she left the medical ward as well. Once Matabi left, Kurama felt the need to lie back down as exhaustion and relief flowed through his body. Yusaka had finally loosened her hold on Kurama since Asura left, but he could hear her soft sobs once in a while. She had buried her head in Kurama's left shoulder and dried her tears into his clothes. Yusaka. Kurama called softly. The golden kitsune barely reacted to Kurama's voice, if only with the stiffening of her body, and the sobs stopped for a moment. But when she lifted her head to look back at her fellow 9-tailed kitsune, Kurama felt something freeze in his chest. Her face looked so pitiful, with flushed red cheeks highlighting still wet tears. 2 rivers still trickled down Yusaka's face without end, and her pink lips quivered to the point of her crying out loud. Do I really do this to you? Kurama lamented to himself. Yusaka sniffled. I am not letting them take you. Kukun. I don't want you to go away. Kurama wanted to argue, to somehow convince Yusaka that this was something that had to be done, but he couldn't find the strength to do it. His chest just continued to tighten at Yusaka, so upset with him and the prospect with leaving. Kami. He hated seeing those tears on her face that he was the indirect cause of. It suddenly reminded Kurama of his days in the elemental nations before being sealed away, when he made his fame known as a walking mass of destruction on civilization. Is that what I amount? Thought Kurama. Just to cause all this suffering. I refuse to have that continue, and Asura is the only one who can possibly help me with this. Kurama's neck refused to turn away from Yusaka, and he felt there was something so terribly wrong with her right now. That the sight of those tears did not belong on her face, and her lips should not be at the breaking point to a crying mess. He couldn't really find the words to fix this. Instead, 2 of his orange-crimson 9 tails snaked from underneath the sheets. They rose up in the air till each tail flanked one side of Yusaka's crying face. Yusaka slightly jumped, feeling something extremely soft stroke both sides of her face. She turned to both sides of herself in shock of the sight of 2 of Kurama's tails wiping away her tears. The sight and the act alone had stopped her crying in bewilderment, which was followed by her heart bumping faster. Knowing it was Kurama simply made her heart soar. Tears should not belong on your face, Kurama said. You're better when you smile. Yusaka sniffed and gave a half-hearted laugh. Kurama has always been so nice to her, even while he was more passive-aggressive to everyone else. She, reluctantly, relinquished her hold on Kurama, but her right hand lingered to still grip on Kurama's left hand tightly. The golden kitsune was so afraid that if she let go entirely, that Kurama, her best friend, would leave forever. Why, you are not going to with him, right, Kukun? Yusaka asked, her voice quivering from her anxiety. You won't leave me, right? Yusaka. I am sorry. Kurama said, every word he spoke feeling like needles stinging his throat. But this isn't something I can say no to. I have to do this. He needed to get to his full potential and then some. Kurama had no idea just how far he could push his body once it reached its peak performance in handling all of his chakra, which is combined from the portion from his sacrificed siblings. This world was filled with powerhouses like Amaterasu that could level down the elemental nations, and Kurama needed to learn proper senjutsu by getting his malice intact. Yasaka, however, would not care about this plan if she ever heard it, and more tears were coming back with a vengeance. No! Yasaka cried in a shrill tone, capturing Kurama's left arm in a crushing vice grip. I won't let them take you away from me. I don't want to be alone forever. No, it won't be forever, Kurama argued, as a sudden and rather strange idea came to mind. I am going to have to pull a Naruto on this one, Kurama thought. What do you mean, Cocoon? Yasaka said, her golden eyes full of hope. Let's make a promise. Kurama proposed, keeping his voice calm and steady. A type that we can't break no matter what. And that is that no matter how long it may be, whether be a day, a month, a year, or a century, we will see each other again. So, I, Kurama, promise you, Yasaka, that I will come back for you. That is a promise I shall never break for you. Yasaka features lifted with every word Kurama. She knew of the utter conviction her fellow kitsune spoke in those words. He further ensured Yasaka by giving a comforting squeeze back with the same hand that Yasaka was holding in her own. Not trusting whatever words she might say, Yasaka accepted Kurama's alleged promise in an embrace, wrapping her arms underneath Kurama's armpits while wrapping her golden nine tails around the both of them. Thank you. Yasaka whimpered, her voice making her seem so vulnerable that made Kurama's heart ache at hearing it. Kurama didn't respond with words. Instead, he lifted the rest of his nine tails and had them snake around Yasaka's form comfortably and had two lie under Yasaka's chin to function as a pillow. Mentally, Kurama made another promise that day. If Yasaka ever found herself without strength, then Kurama will be her strength. The next morning, Kurama had recovered soon thanks to his healing factor and in time for a quick dinner before retiring for the afternoon. He had entered a quick sleep as the exhaustion caught up to him, both mentally and emotionally. He still cursed himself by making Yasaka upset like that at the notion of leaving, and he had already accepted Asora's deal. The Biju needed the god's guidance to get himself stronger and no longer be a danger to everyone. Only his siblings would ever be able to subdue him if he ever went on a rampage, and that was a stretch since only Son Goku had the increased reserves granted by their late siblings' chakra to take him down one-on-one. It wasn't even dawn when Kurama was banished from his dreams and forced into a restless state. After failing to fall back asleep, Kurama decided to do some last-minute sword exercises with Muramasa. For 2 hours, Kurama went through the forms from via the memories of watching his second host Kushina practicing her own sword katas. To strike like lightning yet flow like water. Might and flexibility mixed together in perfect cohesion. But it's not my own style, Kurama grumbled to himself. It may not seem to most, but in times like these Kurama felt like he was being a copycat Uchiha. Sighing from the more rotten thoughts clouding his focus, Kurama swept the blade across the sheath before sliding the demonic blade back into place. With his session done, Kurama now realized that the peak of the sun had just risen up, highlighting the sky in a shade of light purple. His body was covered in a thin sheen of sweat from the intense workout, but was soon rectified from the cool breeze of the still pre-dawn air. Can't sleep. Can you, Nii-san? The voice ignited instinct before thought process that already put the Kitsune yokai in motion. Faster than a blink of an eye, Kurama unsheathed Muramasa, slashed around, and just held back from the final blow. The supposed opponent he would have struck down at the throat was Matabi, still sporting a wide smile and waving both hands in the air despite Muramasa inches from having the Nexo choke on her own blood. Matabi! Kurama exclaimed. Internally alarmed, he almost struck down his sister as he resheathed Muramasa away. What are you doing here? Don't you remember what Pops said, ni teme? Shukaku, Kurama said, turning around to face his second visitor, and now opening his sensory ability to detect a third just to his left. Kurama's crimson eyes settled on the reincarnated Biju of the one-tailed raccoon, now turned into one of the last of the Tanuki yokai. He was the least in physical stature compared to Kurama being short and having lean limbs. Yellow eyes stared back at the Kitsune yokai just starting to hide behind strands of sand-colored hair. On top of his head were a pair of raccoon ears, and waving behind him was a massive tail colored in stripes of black, blue, and sand. Surprisingly, Shukaku's appearance was oddly similar to his Jinchuriki host, Gaara, and even mellowed down on his more violent tendencies since he was now being raised by a loving family. Too bad Shukaku seemed to cause trouble in the more physical way with his control of sand, and ever since reuniting has taken upon himself to take down Kurama by a peg or two. We can always know we are, no matter the distance, Shukaku said, tapping his forehead. Our old Mon's last gift was also able to be a bit empathic. With all those wild emotions you were letting out, you make for a nasty headache. So what has gotten you all angst up, Kurama? The last to make his presence known was Son Goku, and the years since their reunion proved to have the monkey yokai of Asia born a fighter. He had a much more muscled build, complete with bulging biceps and twitching chest. Growing up, Son Goku had foregone the extra amount of hair of his typical yokai species, going with a head of spiky red hair and his red monkey tail wrapped around his waist. Out of all the siblings, Son Goku expressed the best physical might, enough that Kurama felt himself overwhelmed at times. At some points, Kurama would admit to himself that Son Goku could even fight on par with him at full power as they were now. It has to do with that god, isn't it? Matabi said, showing her acute perception via their unique link. Kurama, what did he want from you? He saw potential in me, and he even saw the malice in me, Kurama revealed. But he can train me to master it. I will have to go away from here, however, back to where he resides. Whoa. Shukaku commented, his yellow eyes wide. That's pretty intense. I mean, Pops was sort of a god to the human back home, but you are actually going to be trained by an actual god. There's no way we'll be able to contact you, isn't that it? Son Goku stated, his stoic look straining. Kurama nodded. You know how the Shinto faction sees us and the potential we have. They're a bunch of sitting ducks, yet here we are as their last hope to not be smeared over by the rest of the world. Everyone's been tight-lipped so none of the outside factions know about us. Asura also knows he has to keep absolute secrecy. Kurama can understand it to a point. The factions are like competing hoarders seeing who has the best, and people like himself were the biggest diamonds. If he was made known to the rest of the supernatural world, the next thing Kurama would know, a Mao or a Mao-class entity was out to either recruit him or get him out of the picture. He had no intentions of abandoning the Shinto faction since it has proven to be a decent home, and it was also Yusaka's home as well. We probably won't see each other for a while, Kurama said. Shukaku shifted slightly and Matabi actually had a sorrowful expression as her ears drooped to her head. Being reunited and acting as siblings, it was honestly the best time of their life for any one of them. Matabi was the most expressive, always wanting to visit her brothers any chance she got, and when they get together it was almost euphoric. Because for almost an eon of their existence, they felt like an actual family, and the prospect of seeing one of her brothers leave for so long stung her heart. Son Goku, always the stoic out of the four of them, stared intensely at Kurama. While nothing outwardly showed, there was enough to tell in the atmosphere as Kurama and Son Goku stared down at each other. He eventually relented the stare into an almost defeated sigh and approached Kurama in a neutral manner. Their faces did not betray what they felt, but in a surprising move Son Goku rested his right hand on his brother's shoulder. We may not get along, Son Goku said. Heck, back in the day, some of us wanted to rip each other apart. But from the bottom of my heart, I will say this. Stay safe, Kurama, and get strong. Stronger than even the old man could ever imagine. Yeah, Kurama said lowly. Considering how stubborn I am, it's going to be a long time. And we're not just going to stay so idle while you're off training with a god. Shukaku cried. I still have to beat you to prove that we are all equal. Is that so? Kurama replied with a smirk. Then how about it this? Let's see where we all stand against each other. All of us right here, right now. Matabi widened her eyes in shock. Are you serious, Kurama-ni-san? Dead so. Kurama confirmed with a chuckle, flexing his fingers at his side. I've got the time, and perhaps the power to remind you why I am known as the Big Brother. What say you? Okay, I am game. Matabi agreed, extending her hands out that created claws of blue fire at her fingertips. Don't whine if you get too scratched up, Ni-san. Oh hell yeah. Shukaku yelled, a huge cloud of sand erupting from the ground around the tanuki. I've been looking forward for this. I could use a little hand-to-hand action, Son Goku said, cracking his knuckles that began to steam. And we have a little surprise to show you after all of these years. Kurama quirked an eyebrow in curiosity. His questions were never spoken as his words were choked down in shock from what he was instead shown. All three of Kurama's siblings closed their eyes and reopened to reveal the same crimson Sharingan eyes fully matured. Their three tomos continued to spin rapidly, adding to Kurama's further shock as the patterns evolved into three different distinctions. For the entire time, possibly as long as himself, Matabi, Shukaku, and Son Goku had their own M's Sharingan eyes. Surprised, Son Goku, breaking his stoic expression with a chuckle. You're not the only one that To-san gave a little present. How about that, Teme? Cried Shukaku excitedly. Or are you too chicken? There were many things that should have alarmed Kurama with this revelation. He should be alarmed that their Sharingan eyes could potentially suppress his own chakra just like the Uchiha did. Much less the Kitsune should be alarmed that his siblings shared the same damn eyes. But he simply could not. Instead, Kurama felt in a rare time a sense of excitement. A smile continued to stretch his face in a fox-like grin, and Kurama opened his eyes to reveal his own M's. Bring it on. Kurama challenged. As soon as Kurama said those words, Son Goku, who was standing right in front of him, took the opportunity to smash his fist into the Kitsune's face and sending him tumbling over the grass. Kurama broke his velocity, digging his clawed fingers into the dirt, only to wince as Matabi leapt over him and delivered a burning slash mark at the nape of his neck. The only thing he dodged were the waves of sand Shukaku sent after him. Son Goku was the one to press on the attack first, kicking off his position with a bang from sheer raw strength. Kurama blocked his forward jab with an open palm, but Son Goku immediately threw another with his remaining hand. Kurama's Sharingan saw it in time to deflect to a less vital area, but he knew he was going to have nasty bruise under his armpit. With that done, Kurama locked Son Goku's arm down and went for wide backhand at the monkey yokai's face, but Son Goku had other plans when Kurama felt a kick to his right leg and buckled down. Now on one knee, Son Goku hammered down his right arm aimed for Kurama's head, but was blocked by Kurama's forearm reinforced with chakra and countered by landing a punch to Son Goku's left ribs. Their brawl was unfortunately broken as they both avoided a massive wave of sand from Shukaku, who was trying to bury the two. Unfortunately, the Tanuki had to suddenly divert his attention more to himself as Matabi aimed to get him out of the fight. Her claws were only held back by the sands, acting in an instant defense similar to his former host, Gaara. Claws of blue fire met a dense wall of sand, turning it into glass on contact, and were just several inches from Shukaku's face. Despite the failed blow, Matabi had a wide smirk on her face. Remember, Ni-san, it's a royal, Matabi reminded coyly. Oh, I remember, Shukaku said ominously. Matabi blinked at the tone before the wall of glass shattered as Shukaku's massive tail swung around and batted Matabi away to crash through a tree and boulder. With Matabi recovering, Shukakau focused his chakra at his fingertips till they were surrounded in an almost white hue, a color of wind chakra. The Tanuki swung his hands down, sending two crescent blades of wind chakra 2 stories ripping through the ground aimed at his siblings. Kurama and Son Goku dodged out of the way, and Matabi countered with a swipe of her own claws using wind chakra as well. The blue-haired Nekosho took a breath and unleashed an inferno of blue flames headed for Shukaku. He avoided the searing flames with a forward that brought him too close to the fighting Son Goku and Kurama pair. It was according to Matabi's plan as she rocketed off with blue fire roaring from the soles of her feet, thus pushing her forward at frightening speeds. Meanwhile, Kurama found himself getting pressed with both Shukaku on the offensive with his Sand and Son Goku's martial arts that incorporated using their late brothers, Kakuyo, steam release in his fists. Matabi was on her way to join the fray, but his attention switched to the immediate danger of a wave of sand towering above him, while at the same time Son Goku was flipping into an axe kick via the tracking prowess of his Sharingan eyes. As such, Kurama released his 9 tails and 3 to block Son's punch. At the same time, Kurama spat a wave of frosted wind to freeze the sand in place to then smash it with another tail. Matabi used the new ice wall as cover by scaling up and pouncing down at the fighting yokai siblings. She landed right between Kurama and Son, delivering a quick kick to both of their chins with a nasty crack. Growling, Kurama smashed down his 9 tails to overwhelm Matabi, but the Nekosho proved her nimble motions weaving through the storm of fox tails to get close to Kurama to swing a punch. Kurama caught the blow and the follow-ups, including a flurry of kicks that got her into the air, but the Kitsune yokai did not let her escape as he grabbed her left ankle and yanked her back to the ground hard. That was when Son Goku took his chance to tackle both Kurama and Matabi with a shoulder charge, carrying them through the thicket of trees and rocks till they found themselves embedded in a large boulder. Son pulled back his right fist, steam bursting off his elbow for extra power to put into the blow. Kurama met with a fully formed Rasengan that blasted Son away, and gave Matabi the opening to send a kick to the monkey yokai's chest while also jumping off to kick off of Kurama as well. Once in the air, Matabi unleashed a torrent of blue fire from her mouth, engulfing both of her siblings. A blast of steam from Son immediately dispersed the flames, but he wasn't without some minor burns on his form. Kurama had no such defense with burns littering his body, but quickly healing due to his healing factor. Shukaku arrived back into the fight, unleashing a volley of high compact balls of sand firing like bullets as they pierced through wood and rock. While Kurama and Matabi dodged out of the way and entered their own fight, Son took the charge, reinforcing his body in a layer of molten rock and charged down the tanuki. Whatever defense Shukaku used proved useless against the lava armor, and when he swung his massive tail, Son caught it and used as leverage to smash Shukaku around effortlessly. Back with Kurama and Matabi, the former was forced on the defense, finding that Matabi was more faster in close combat and he was only keeping track with his Sharingan. He also had to keep his footing safe as the Nekosho would occasionally go for a low blow to get him down on one knee. Kurama swiped away a swift blow from Matabi, followed by an elbow blow that Kurama dodged by moving his head out of the way. His remaining hand snapped up into an uppercut that struck Matabi's chin, and in her staggered state allowed Kurama to press on the offense with a punch to her shoulder and another to her ribs that sent her flying back. At that moment, Son returned with Shukaku, with the latter having been thrown and anchoring his tail to keep himself on his feet. The 4 siblings now stood in one perfect diamond formation, their eyes darting to each other. They tried to assess which to attack first, creating a thick tension in the air. From some unknown signal, their limbs and bodies turned into a blur of motion as they engaged in 4-way fist fight. 4 pairs of crimson eyes streaked across the space the blurring forms of the former Biju occupied. The heightened visual prowess of their eyes made every kick, punch, and jab countered and riposted only to be repeated again. This stalemate was finally broken when all of them was met with a simultaneous blow, whether to their midsection, chest, or face. They both delivered and were dealt a crushing blow that made all 4 stagger back as if hit by a freight train. Simultaneously, they snapped their heads up with their Sharingan eyes blazing a bright crimson. Amaterasu. The space between all 4 where their glares met exploded in a burst of black flames that knocked each one of them to their feet. As they recovered, they were treated to the awkward aftermath their battle had left, with spots burning in black flames and too many trees uprooted. Kurama, Matabi, Son Goku, and Shukaku glanced at each other before suddenly letting off an amused chuckle. "It would seem we took this a bit too far," Shukaku admitted shockingly. "I know my parents would be pissed if they saw this." "Hey, mine too," Matabi agreed. "We could keep going, but who knows what will happen then. Wanna call it a draw?" Son Goku shrugged. "Sure, you good with that, Kurama?" "Yeah," Kurama said with a gruff chuckle. "That was actually really fun." "How do you think I feel?" Shukaku commented with a laugh. The 4 Bijus paused to dissipate the black flames of the Sharingan Amaterasu before there was any permanent damage to the environment. A silence descended between them before Kurama held a strained expression. "Guys, come here for a second," Kurama said while gesturing to the Biju to come closer. The other 3 exchanged glances and shrugged before approaching Kurama. They stood before the Kitsune yokai awaiting for whatever he was going to show or say. Instead, they were shocked when they were all caught in Kurama's arms and held tightly that they could only identify as a hug. His face hung low as it was squished with the heads of his siblings. "Father said that I am supposed to be the big brother," Kurama said lowly. "And yet in the centuries we have existed, not once have I not even given any of you a hug. This life we have been given is a new chance for us to start over, and I want us to be a family the old man would be proud of. It may not seem much, but you, and our late brethren, are the best siblings I can ask for." "Nissan." Matabi said in embarrassment, but snuggled closer to her elder brother. Sun was content in letting Kurama have his moment until he heard sniffles from his left. He turned in the direction and his face gained a perplexed look, finding the source to be the crying tanuki that is their little brother. Seems Shukaku had been bottling up something for all this time. Are you crying? Sun said, baffled. And no, Shukaku denied unconvincingly. Jay just got some dirt in my eye. They did not know how long they stayed like that hugging each other. None of them could really care because for the first time in a very long while they finally felt like a true family. Unknown mountain range, we're here, Asura announced. Upon Asura's announcement, the Kitsune yokai of 12 years old with orange-crimson hair dropped his bag of supplies and dropped to the ground with his legs crossed, exhausted. Finally, after a week of inconspicuous travel from the island country of Japan and across the continent of Asia, did they finally arrive at Asura's private home. The final treks were a blur for Kurama, but he did remember at some point walking on air as if in the presence of invisible stairs, and here he was finally here now on top of mountain overlooking a valley covered in a thick white mist. Not a single day went by without Kurama reminiscing his final goodbyes with his siblings, Yasaka, Amaterasu, and all that he knew that was home. He received a few hugs from Amaterasu and Matabi, but the real problem was trying to get Yasaka to let go of his ankle. The entire time the golden-haired Kitsune girl latched onto him, crying with so many tears to stay with her. It honestly hurt Kurama to see his only friend in this world look like that, and it took a full book of apologies and promises to soothe her down. Promises that he will live up to. If I can't keep a promise, then I'd be shaming you, Naruto. Kurama resolved in his head. In his travels, Kurama was treated with sights he never found in the elemental nation. While Japan's geography was more or less the same as it was in his previous home dimension, Kurama was not prepared for the wide expanse that the rest of this humongous world had to offer. The land of China contained its own beautiful lands of vast seas of greenery surrounding mountains that were more like giant fingers reaching for the heavens. Even the feel of the natural energy had a noticeable change to it compared to what he felt in Kyoto, almost like a different flavor. However, Asura had chosen to avoid any big-time cities where both humans and the supernatural were highly concentrated if they wanted to keep Kurama's existence a secret. Not to sound like a whiny, but there is a whole lot of nothing, Kurama commented. Asura ignored Kurama as the god stared at the valley below. His power suddenly flexed so small it came off like a small wisp of orange, yet sent out a massive wave of his demonic-like energies shaking Kurama to his core. As if in reaction, the thick fog that blanketed the valley swept away. Standing in the center in all of its majesty was a massive golden Hindu palace the size of a city glimmering in the light. 8 towers surrounded it, their golden peaks topped with celestial symbols of stars, suns, or moons. Wow! Kurama responded with wide eyes. Nice place, so, when do we? Training begins now. Kurama never finished as a chromium fist met his face with a sickening crack, and thus marked the Shin Yokai's first day of otherworldly pain that was training. Back here again. These words were spoken from a tall man standing over 6 feet in height. The first notable detail of the man was the mane of spiky crimson hair cascading down to his shoulders and splaying around his face. Black scars reminiscent to whisker marks and slit red eyes gave him a feral addition to his handsome complexion of peach skin and fanged smile. A body of hardened muscle was hidden underneath a worn white tunic and black hakama pants with too many dirt stains. At his hip was a seemingly regular katanas with a coil-like grip. Propped on his shoulder was a sack containing the Mont's very few belongings. 11 years from that hellhole in India, and I come to see this, the man mused with a click of his tongue. His crimson eyes were overlooking the landscape of Kyoto, complete with its abundant wilderness and the city itself nestled in the distance. The sun had just risen from the morning, bathing the land in a golden hue. He didn't need to squint to see the massive palace lording over the city where he once called home for 12 years. On that line of thought, the Mont's vision was assailed by a fair face with golden eyes and bright golden hair. "I'll see you soon, Yasaka." The man spoke softly, his feral look diminishing as a result. "You don't have to wait anymore, my little siblings. Your big brother Kurama is back in town." Kurama gave a slight hop from his vantage point that was upon a hill and now landing upon the steep slope impossible for anyone normal to climb down. A confident smirk spread Kurama's lips as he planted his feet into the rough soil, but nothing could even leave a scratch on his skin thanks to his dense chakra. Over the decade, his enormous reserves and density have been refined to the point his chakra acted like a layer of armor beneath his skin. It would take a considerably powerful attack to leave a wound, and even then that was not factoring in his healing capabilities. And yet his master of a god Asura always made these advantages mute through overwhelming power Kurama simply couldn't match. To this day, it still shocked him how an entity such as him existed in any world that outclassed even Kaguya and the Jubi back in the elemental nations. He lost count of the amount of times he was forced into a berserk state through the use of Asura's power that he called mantra just so Kurama was forced to conquer in his own wrath to use senjutsu. Even when in that berserk state at its peak with the full might of his power that was the feared Kyuubi of the elemental nations to destroy entire countries, Asura was ever hardly phased. It took 5 years of Kurama's training to conquer his dark side to access senjutsu, and despite being combined with his full power he still got his ass handed to him. And to think they were even worse entities than Earth's strongest. Speaking of senjutsu, Kurama understood how the malice of the world's natural energy can be purified. Compared to the elemental nations, nature here was extremely violent. Eons of war and evil from humans such as deforestation have caused an imbalance in the world. No longer was the natural energy pure, now carrying a malice that made Kurama's tantrum in the elemental nations tame in comparison. If humanity persists in its negligence of nature in the coming centuries, then the whole of the Earth's life force will be saturated with the world's rage, pain, and revenge. Kurama found a small solution to this, if only as a practical one. The reincarnated Biju would use his senjutsu and draw in the dark energy in the world into his body. He would then act as a filter purifying the malice of the earth and releasing the natural chakra back to the world. The result of the distributing natural energy had the effect of strengthening the life of the planet. Theoretically, with enough users using the same method of senjutsu, the purified chakra could revive thousands of acres of cut trees. The kitsune smiled at the thought of using senjutsu this way. Being trained in the art had garnered Kurama to show nature great respect. Perhaps he could create an order of yokai who would solely use senjutsu to purify the earth's malice and heal the world. He idly wondered if Hagoromo would be proud seeing him using this method to heal the planet. Just the thought of how humans have mistreated the planet gave life to him, kindled the remaining malice he had for the very people that perverted his father's dream. However, he was not going to succumb to that mindset any longer. After all, Kurama made a promise to the only human he can ever call friend, and he was not ever going to break it. If only you could see me now, Kit, Kurama thought with a smile as he jumped off at the foot of the steep hill. He took a slow, leisure walk admiring the forest of Kyoto's outskirts. As he did so, Kurama stretched out his senses to feel if any of his siblings were here. Within the city in some isolated parts the Crimson Kitsune could only make out one chakra signature from the rest that rivaled his own, and it felt like rough sand upon his acute senses. That automatically told Kurama that was Shukaku, but left Son Goku and Matabi out of the country. Their absence was logical due to their individual station. Son Goku was reborn as a monkey yokai, the same as the famed Sun Wukong, and they made their home in the mountains of Asia. Matabi as the Nekosho heiress had her familial home situated within the underworld where the yokai clan lived, but she would come to the real world to enact her duties as the Shinigami's priestess. Kurama felt internally saddened he would get to see 2 of his remaining siblings, but he could not blame them for living their own lives. On the other hand, I can give them quite the surprise, Kurama thought with a wide grin. Eventually coming to the outskirts of the city of Kyoto, Kurama immediately noticed something awry. Normally, he would have met with a group of Tengu guards or at least have eyes watching him from the roofs. Instead he got none of that, and the only stares he received were the curious glances from the humans and disguised yokai walking in the streets in their everyday business. Kurama hummed in thought as he pulled on the sack that carried his possessions. Something's not right, Kurama muttered. I have heard relations with the underworld and Grigori were worsening, but what could have happened to have most of the guards abandon Kyoto like this? Because I don't trust the utter scum of the underworld. Any other time, Kurama would have jumped into a fight and destroy fuck all response from the surprise of someone getting past his acute senses. Training with Asura however had allowed the Kitsune to attune his senses to the energy of the divine. It was why he calmly turned around to look down at the beautiful face of Amaterasu, the sun goddess and his guardian for what he knew as his childhood. As a goddess she hadn't aged a day. but her extravagant radiance as a goddess was toned down to not alert the nearby humans. Even so, Kurama caught a glance of yokai looking at Amaterasu with reverence while the normal humans were kept ignorant. "Hello, Lady Amaterasu." Kurama greeted. "None of that, Kurama-kun. Let me get a good look at you." Amaterasu almost cooed with a smile, reaching up to caress his cheeks like a mother would. My. You've grown so much. You're taller than myself." Kurama's right eye twitched. "Can we not do this now? It's not like I am a child anymore." "You will always my child to me," Amaterasu proclaimed, taking back her hands and held them within the sleeves of her black kimono. "Still have that bite to you. I am surprised Asura-kun couldn't beat that out of you." "You have no idea how much he succeeded with everything else," Kurama thought, holding in a squirm at the memory of his many humiliating and one-sided defeats at the Hindu god of justice. "Well then, why don't you walk with me to the palace?" Amaterasu offered, walking down the street. Kurama soon followed the chief Shinto goddess by her right side, his full height towering ahead over her. Together, they walked like everyone else did, and hardly were the human ever aware of a goddess and the many yokai around them. That is the power of the constant yojutsu that covered the city to hide its yokai residences from the main populace. "Amaterasu, just what is going on?" Kurama asked, zero humor in his voice. "Where are the guardians of the city? I haven't even sensed any one of them to keep an eye on me." Amaterasu sighed. "The yokai guardians and militia are out patrolling our lands to prevent any devil touching upon our soul. Just a year ago, one of the demon pillars tried to take the Nekosho clan by force, both its land and its people. Despite my very public ban of devil coming into Shinto territory, they still thought themselves higher than my law to come and claim my children like property." "Amaterasu, calm down," Kurama exclaimed, laying a hand to soothe Amaterasu with purified senjutsu. "You are going to cause an unnecessary scene." Amaterasu blinked, realizing her emotions had made her divine power slip out of control. The air in the street was superheated to scorching temperatures, causing heat waves to be obvious around them. Earth scorched black and even slightly melted at her feet. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, Amaterasu reined in her control of her domain and the area turned mostly back to normal. She glanced to Kurama with a thankful nod. "Sorry, Kurama-kun." Amaterasu apologized. "To have you of all people to calm me down, I must really be losing it. It's just, these years have made me absolutely sickened with devils, especially the noble houses. They claim to be friends, and yet they strive to enslave my children with that dreaded evil peace system." "Do the four Satans want to cause a calamity?" Kurama wondered out loud. It wasn't just training with Asura that he had done. Once in a while, he would be educated more broadly about the moonlit world. He mostly focused on the superpowers of the world, such as the Greek gods, the Norse, and of course the fractured biblical pantheon. Separated into three factions known as Heaven with the Holy Church, the Gregory of fallen angels, and the underworld of devils. The devil's government worked much like that of the hidden villages, only with four of the underworld's most powerful granted supreme rule known as the Satan. They went by the titles of Asmodeus, Beelzebub, Leviathan, and Lucifer, who held the most power. No, Amaterasu answered, surprising Kurama. "In truth, I do not blame the Satans for this. I know them well enough to tell that they only mean the best for peace. They truly are good people. Unfortunately, their definition of peace is entirely different to what their nobles want, who are the real problem in this mess." So there was divide of interests between the main leaders and the many clans that make up bulk of the government. That was deeply concerning. He did not know much about the four Satan beyond the bare minimum, but if what Amaterasu said was true, this was much worse than some political scandal. It would have been easier if the Satans had the same agenda, but now it was more of a chaotic mess. This could start a war, Kurama stated, already seeing parallels with what he had seen in the elemental nations. "Precisely," Amaterasu confirmed. "The underworld is splintered more than the devils will admit, especially with the warhawks that have lived since the Great War. With the introduction of the evil peace system 1,000 years ago, it has only fueled their ambitions. And that is not counting the old Satan faction." Kurama did not say anything, but his lips turned down into a frown where behind him the kitsune growled menacingly. A dangerous look appeared in his crimson eyes, shifting into his own state. If Amaterasu were to look into Kurama's eyes, she would have been stumped by the raw power shown within them. This state of aggression was born out of the danger the fractured underworld was posing for the Shinto pantheon. The same faction that housed him, fed him, and practically raised him for what he can call the closest to a childhood. It was here that Kurama made amends to his siblings. More importantly, it was the home to Yasaka, the first person to offer to be his friend and stayed by his side even after showing his more darker side. To think of devils trying to endanger her and all that she cherished. It was only the harsh discipline by the world's strongest god that he kept a lid on the rumbling wrath threatening to explode. "Take this from me," Kurama said. "If the worst comes, know that you can count on me to help you out. I'll show the devils no mercy." Amaterasu smiled. "I see. You truly have grown powerful, makes you wonder just how much." "Well, I still haven't been able to get a win on Asura," Kurama growled. "He always beats me to the curb." Even when he applied the maximum defenses Kurama had available to him, Asura's punches still managed to break through and land with devastating results. He could still feel the phantom sores. "Ah, we're here," Amaterasu announced. Kurama came back to his full senses and was slightly surprised that in their talk they had made up the flight of stairs and were now standing before the gates into the royal palace. Two Tengu guards dressed in samurai-like armor stood firm at either side of the red wooden gate. In one hand they held a naginate infused with chakra as Kurama sensed from, and on their back was some sort of stick with a metal pipe. Unknown to Kurama, this was the latest in human technological warfare, known as a firearm that fired a ball lead faster and more devastating than any arrow. "Lady Amaterasu," bowed the Tengu, "and who would this be?" "A very dear son finally returning home," Amaterasu said, and without a word the Tengu opened the gates and the goddess escorted Kurama in. "Yasaka will be so happy to see you." Kurama felt his chest lurch and his breath hitch in his throat. The thought of Yasaka waiting for him always caused a reaction like that. His mind brought out numerous scenarios. Would she truly be joyful to see him? Has his absence caused her to loathe him? Would she cry and curse his name for being gone for so long, despite making a promise? The kitsune shook his head before it went to darker thoughts. No, he refused to think like that. Yasaka is a much better person than that. Snapped out of that depressing musing, he had realized his body moved automatically beside Amaterasu and was walking through the familiar halls of the palace. Kurama's ears twitched and perked up from the shaggy mane of his crimson-orange hair, and he allowed his 9 tails to reveal themselves. "Kurama-kun, are you listening?" Amaterasu asked after going on a monologue. Kurama offered a nervous smile. "Sorry. I tend to get lost in my own thoughts these days. Spending time with just Asura and a few servants in a humongous palace will do that. I usually oof. Iyyaa. Unfortunately for Kurama, he would not be able to finish his words when something, or rather someone, bumped at his neck. It was far from being enough to make Kurama lose his balance, but he did stumble half a step back. The person unlucky to bump into him wasn't so fortunate as she dropped to the floor. "I am so sorry," squeaked the feminine voice. "I didn't see where I was going." "No, it was my fault." Kurama apologized, blinking his eyes from the daze. "I was just paying attention." His words caught in his throat when his crimson eyes finally landed on the personification of voluptuous beauty he bumped into and standing up just a head shorter than him. If he thought Amaterasu was beautiful, then this woman blew the goddess out of the park by a single glance. Light peach skin was perfect to the eyes and golden hair held into a bun by amber pins. She wore a golden yukata with a yellow obi tied hugging the curves of a perfect, very proportioned hourglass figure. It made Kurama widen his eyes at the exposed flesh pillows for breasts where the yukata parted at the shoulders, measuring well over H-cup. "What in the fuck?" Kurama screamed mentally, his brain in a rush to keep control of his body's hormones. Good grief, they make that Senju hags look like bug bites. It was then he finally met the woman's eyes, and they were also staring with the same intensity. His heart jumped in shock, for how could he forget those same golden amber orbs? "Yasaka," Kurama thought in a shocked daze. For the golden kitsune, she was at a loss of words at the figure she bumped into. She had already apologized for bumping into him, but could not get her eyes off of him. The man was the epitome of a handsome rogue combined with rugged features from the mane of long crimson hair, feral whisker marks, and sharp teeth. Struggling to look down, Yasaka blushed a bit, clearly noticing how his shirt strained at the compact muscle underneath, and the neckline gave her a peek at the sculpt-ped pectorals. It left no wonder to why the man she walked into felt like an iron wall. He was built like one, and his greater height made him ever more imposing upon the beautiful kitsune. She felt Kurama's stare on her form and chose to meet his gaze. But when her golden eyes met his intense crimson orbs, Yasaka felt as if the whole world went still, and it did not help her heart beating in hope when she saw the 9 tails and fox ears that revealed him as a fellow kitsune yokai. There was only one kitsune yokai to match her in the number of tails. Only one person in the entire world to possess that unique feral complexion and orange-crimson hair. One person in the entire world she held closest to her heart, and to wait for his return when they separated as children, even if it would take the ends of the world. Cocoon, gasped Yasaka. That nickname spoken in such a familiar and longing manner was like honey to Kurama's ears. Never would he imagine feeling such joy from being called a name from childhood. It was the fact it was said at all without contempt made his lips stretch into a wide, warm grin. Hey, Yasaka. Kurama said. I am back. Years of training to the limit in life-threatening scenarios did not prepare him for the speed Yasaka possessed lunging forward. He was tempted to bring out his Sharingan instinctively before lithe arms wrapped around his chest. Yasaka laid her head at the crook of his neck, her golden hair tickling the male kitsune's chin. It was a tight embrace, and Kurama was devoting half of his bodily functions to not look down where Yasaka's massive breasts squished like dough against his body. You're really back, Cocoon, sniffed Yasaka, a happy smile on her face. Yokata. Glad to be back, Kurama replied, returning the hug. In the meantime of their embrace, Yasaka's hands were clutching around his body. The blush on her cheeks returned with tenfold force at the literal iron feel of dense muscle straining against the white tunic. From her youth watching Kurama train in his own katas, Yasaka knew that his body would grow above average in the populace. She had no idea her best friend's body would become quite the Adonis build. Oh my! Yasaka thought, snuggling deeper into Kurama's lovely embrace within his arms. There's so much muscle. I want to wrap in them forever. Kurama said, slightly pulling back from the embrace to give Yasaka another appraising view. Grown a lot. Wonderfully even. Specifically in one area. Kurama thought idly, then made a mental note to punch himself in the face. So have you. Yasaka replied in kind, her eyes studying his form. Very much so, one conniving voice in Yasaka's head purred at the sight of Kurama's very muscled body. No words were said between them, becoming more awkward as it went on. The pair were simply at a loss of words from the shock of seeing each other grown up into what they were now. Where Yasaka looked like divine beauty outclassing even famed goddesses, Kurama looked like a man fresh from the wilds with a feral handsomeness. Amaterasu had been standing in the background, almost as if spying from behind the corner at the end of the hall. The goddess could literally feel the awkward tension, making the Shinto sun goddess cringe. Do something you too, Amaterasu screamed in her head, forcing herself from not interfering in this precious moment. Some luck befell to disappear the awkward silence when a loud growl echoed throughout the hall. A very deep growl of a stomach strong enough to be felt shaking the air. Yasaka blinked in confusion, and her eyes automatically tracked to the source trailing down Kurama's body to his abdomen. The reincarnated Biju sported a bashful expression, further showcased as Kurama scratched the left side of his cheek. Excuse me, apologized Kurama, embarrassed. I was in such a rush I sort of skipped breakfast on the way. Yasaka giggled. Silly, Cocoon, skipping a meal. You know what don't you let you make something just for you? I would love to, Kurama replied. Been too long since I tasted your cooking. Kurama could not help but smile down at his fellow kitsune and the first friend he has made in this world. It was an amazing feeling to him how they had reunited hardly a minute and they were talking as if they had done so since yesterday. When he smiled at Yasaka, she returned her own, making her face more beautiful. Yet seeing that smile, Kurama could not help that something was wrong with it. Like it wasn't the same that he remembered from his childhood before he left. With his sharp instinct and his natural empath sensitivity, Kurama knew Yasaka felt unexplicable joy with him returned to her, as well as some sort of underlying emotion he couldn't tell, but underneath it all was a deeply rooted sorrow. What or who has made you sad? thought Kurama in bewilderment while also feeling the sudden urge to go destroy the cause. The reincarnated Biju quickly swapped the thoughts away. Kurama assumed all these thoughts and assumptions were due to his own tense nerves. During the trip back to Kyoto, while avoiding any unwanted attention from other factions, Kurama was truly excited to be back with Yasaka. It was in this place he can truly say was his home. Meanwhile, Amaterasu was having a cheering fit in celebration. Yes, 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 it's happening. It needs to happen. For that Amaterasu knew, Kurama was Yasaka's greatest hope to not only be happy, but also free. Palace kitchen. With a deep sigh, Kurama sank into one down and sat on a loving cushion in one of the many dining rooms surrounding one of the palace's kitchen. Usually they were operated by the servants of yokai, but he learned long ago Yasaka was more hands-on in chores. One could describe the golden kitsune as a natural housewife. He set down the traveling sack he had on the floor beside him and rested his arms on the table. Next, Kurama dislodged Muramasa, sheath and buckle included, and let the demonic blade settle on his lap. Nostalgia filled Kurama as he breathed the homely air of the Kyoto palace. Nature had its own allure to Kurama as he discovered traveling across Asia, but being in the place he grew up had its own quality to it. His eyes trailed to his sack on the floor. One of his tails moved to the string and loosened the bond to give Kurama a peek at the contents within. It was any sort of knick-knack or some arbitrary thing that Kurama picked up on the road. Most were gifts from locals involved in the supernatural he decided to help out, such as stray devils from the biblical factions, Oni, or Hindu demons. The past him from the elemental nation would have definitely left humans to their ill fate, but abandoning people in need would ruin the memory of his best friend, Naruto. On the thought of the Oni, Kurama shivered a little, remembering how they oddly looked in Otsutsuki on some sort of drug addiction. His right hand reached down and plucked out what he was told was a toy, but its general purpose was lost to Kurama. It was made of polished wood and sticks holding several bases together. Kurama was given this by a child from a village after revitalizing their crops with his senjutsu, effectively using a meager version of the wood release. He kept it as a way to honor the child's thanks, remembering the beaming smile the kid gave. He put it back and fished out another item. This was a lustrous item of a sapphire and ruby a quarter the size of his palm, each encased in obsidian stone. Kurama acquired this, saving the son of a noble from a devil that thought to use the kid as a bargaining chip upon the family. The devil would have succeeded if it weren't for this timely arrival, and he was given these earrings as a reward. According to the noble, they were the very earring owned by the swordsmith couple Mo Yi and Gon Zhang, famed in their tale of the creation of Kanshu and Bakuya. Again, Kurama held onto them as a way to accept their thanks. His hands left the sack alone and trailed down the Muramasa blade held within its ebony sheath. Asura did not let Kurama sloth in his sword training as well as his senjutsu trials, especially since he was the chosen of Muramasa. Mastering the demonic blade was more than difficult. The demonic blade was unlike anything Kurama had ever witnessed, both here and his previous life in the elemental nations. It wasn't just powerful, it had a devastating effect at the conceptual level, a feat beyond the likes of chakra or traditional magic can accomplish. What made the blade so dangerous in his hands was its representation of the man who created this weapon and his ideals. To cut the laws of the world itself. And now I have that power, Kurama mused in his head. I am here, Yasaka sang, entering the dining room. Kurama's ears twitched at Yasaka's heavenly voice. His eyes snapped immediately to the kitsune. Her golden tails trailed out in their full display behind her like rays of sunshine. Held in both of her hands under her massive bust was a tray carrying 2 bowls each with a plate of onigiri wrapped in seaweed. From the steam wafting through the room, Kurama could pick up the scent of shrimp and eel coming from her own broth. Yasaka took a seat on the other side of the table facing her cocoon. She set down the tray, revealing the contents in the bowl to Kurama to be udon noodle soup, accompanied with cuts of fish cake, dried shrimp toppings, sesame seeds, and green onion. Noticing the fish cake, Kurama snickered, having a faint memory when Kushina chose the name for Naruto while still pregnant when eating ramen. The despair Naruto would have felt actually being named after a ramen topping would have been hilarious. Kurama grabbed the provided chopsticks and clicked them in a practiced manner. He almost went into digging into the delicacy until he noticed Yasaka's expectant gaze. The orange-crimson kitsune blinked in embarrassment that he almost pulled a Naruto, and not the good kind. Yasaka smiled at Kurama's remembered etiquette as they both clasped their hands together. Iddikamasu. With the traditional prayer done, Kurama wasted no time to pick out the udon noodles stuffed into the bowl and began slurping it up into his maw. His taste buds danced from the heaven brought by Yasaka's cooking. The years have certainly not diminished her skills and had in fact grown to a greater degree. A pleased moan left Kurama's lips, muffled by his stuffed mouth. Still loud enough for Yasaka to hear, giggling behind her hand. "You like it, don't you?" Yasaka said. Kurama chuckled after swallowing a mouthful of the broth. "Be it a decade or a century, your cooking will always be the best to me." Yasaka blushed crimson red from Kurama's compliment, and it did not help her heart from the naturally gorgeous smile he directed towards her. The golden kitsune decided to focus her attention on the meal she prepared lest her heart start popping out of her chest. There was some silence between the two as they ate Yasaka's home cooking, with the occasional giggle from the golden kitsune watching Kurama go in bliss from her cooking. It filled her with pride knowing her Cocoon enjoyed what she made specifically for him. It was after 3 minutes of this silence becoming horrendous did Yasaka strike up a conversation. "So please tell me, Cocoon, how is it out there?" Yasaka said. "Where did you go? What did you see?" Kurama quirked his brow up in reminiscent, pausing in his eating. "Well, the reincarnated Biju decided to leave out most of his time with Asura in India, only leaving in some bits when he went on assignments to test his skills. On the other hand, Kurama told in vivid detail of his exploits across Asia when he quite literally walked back to Japan. Took a whole month to do so, and it was in that little adventure did Kurama realize he had Naruto's penchant for attracting problems. Yasaka was oddly enraptured about the world outside of Japan, indicated by her swishing tails, but it made Kurama wonder so if she can simply move from Kyoto for a little while. When it came Yasaka's turn to share, it came to his shock that Yasaka literally could not leave Kyoto. As the lastest of the royal kitsune blessed by Amaterasu and born from Inari, she had sole control over Kyoto's ley lines. The entire land was dependent on her presence in Kyoto, and if she were to leave for more than a week the whole land would collapse from the unstable buildup in chakra. A forlorn look settled on Yasaka's face as she explained herself and her new upcoming duties as the new leader of the yokai. That was broken when she felt something tickle at her cheek, contorting her face into pleasurable giggles until she found out it was one of Kurama's tails. Said kitsune was flashing Yasaka a grin. "Come on, it can't be that bad. You've got me here, and I am not going anywhere. I am good company, am I not?" thought Kurama. "Cocoon," muttered Yasaka, her face practically steaming. Kurama quirked a confused eyebrow. "What's with the red face?" Nothing." Yasaka panicked, abruptly going back to her udon and onigiri and devouring them at a rapid pace. "Let's just get back at eating our yummy food. Hehehe. Woman are so strange," Kurama thought with a sweat drop, while also confused to the sudden whirl of emotions from Yasaka. Kurama went back to his own meal, downing down the udon bowl instantly followed by onigiri. He learned during his adolescent years that his body required a greater calorie to keep with the production of chakra steady and himself healthy. It was more or less the same as Naruto's appetite, minus the ramen addiction. Thank the higher beings for that. However, he could not keep down the great belch from his gullet, shaking the room and creating a fit of heavenly laughter from Yasaka. "This right here," Kurama thought, staring back at Yasaka. "This is worth living for." There was a sudden knock on the door and Yasaka called them in the next second. The door slid open to reveal one of the many servants of the palace already bowing before Yasaka. "Lady Yasaka, there is a guest at the gate that has been insisting on seeing someone," the servant reported. He kept on referring to Ni Teme. Kurama sighed in exasperation. Of all the things, it would be Shukaku to get him away from this. Even so, he stood up from his seating position and put the empty dishes on the tray. "Sorry, Yasaka-chan." Kurama apologized. "I have to go take care of this mess." "No problem," Yasaka chirped, "and please come back soon." "I will," Kurama promised, sliding the doors closed behind him. As soon as Kurama left Yasaka to her lonesome, the kitsune's smiling countenance crumbled into a look of despair. With elbows perched on top of the table, Yasaka buried her head into her hands. Light sobs escaped from her as the sign at the deep well of sadness in her heart. It all stemmed from the fact on the coronation of her becoming leader she was also going to be married. It was an arranged marriage, of course. A sort of scheme built up by the god of storms Susanoo, who held heavy influence in Kyoto. In another time, Yasaka would have persevered as a part of her duty. But in this time she felt despair because she fell in love. If there was anyone in the world she would ever marry, it will always be Kurama. It was why Yasaka couldn't bring herself to tell Kurama she was going to be married. She couldn't bear to utter the words themselves, knowing the person of her heart was not to be. Yasaka felt trapped in a cold cage and not muffling her cries of help. All she could do was cry. "I want my cocoon." "Wow, you really got the literal short end there, ne Shukaku?" Kurama commented with a snicker. The guards of the palace escorted him to the entrance where the very outspoken person was present for his attention. Amaterasu allowed the guest to come through the gates and step into the inner courtyard with Kurama's permission. If any trouble did break out, which likely would, the goddess had enough trust in the crimson-orange kitsune to handle it with minimum damage. Kurama himself believed that Shukaku will only go so far as to spout some crass words to get him riled up like the old days. As tall as he was, Kurama had to look straight down just to meet the gaze of familiar golden eyes twitching in irritation at his wide grin. He expected to see Shukaku more burly and grown in some humanoid version of himself as a biju. How unfortunate it was that Shukaku's reincarnation as a yokai coincidentally took more inspiration from his last Jinchuriki host. The tanuki even looked like Gaara to the lean form, facial structure, and a height of only 53 compared to Kurama's impressive 64, showcasing solid muscle. Instead of Gaara's red hair and pale skin, Shukaku had sandy brown hair and a much more tanned complexion. Stretching from his lower back was a giant raccoon tail matching Shukaku's height raised over his head. Another eye twitch followed by a snarl from Shukaku as he spoke. "Shut up, Teme. I bet I can kick your ass." If there was any improvement in the years they haven't seen each other, it would be that Shukaku had a better lid on his chakra. Normally his chakra would be spilling out violently due to his ill temper, causing anyone lower than high class in strength to struggle under the pressure of his power. This was the same issue Shukaku had as a tailed beast in the elemental nations, radiating out his chakra in such amounts that Kurama could feel it across the continent. Not to mention both of their power have increased with the shared chakra from their late siblings and the possible growth they have achieved in this new life. Now, despite how Shukaku seethed right now in envy at Kurama's height, his chakra was not exploding outward. "You've gotten better with how controlled your chakra is," Kurama complimented, giving Shukaku a smile. "I am so proud of my little brother." "Maybe just enough to beat you," grumbled Shukaku, looking down to hide his embarrassment. It was still surreal for the tanuki for Kurama to show genuine affection after their last life. In the elemental nations, they both hated each other, with Shukaku wanting to get on up on Kurama and the kitsune wanting to obliterate his little brother to get him to stop annoying him. He definitely didn't hate it. It was actually a nice feeling. Not when it was their father who took care of them. Something landing on his head and ruffling his hair pulled Shukaku's attention to reality. His golden eyes looked up and widened, seeing Kurama's arm outstretched, messing up his hair in a playful manner. There was no mischief or wicked smile, but one born out of love for his sibling. "It's good to see you, Shukaku," Kurama said softly. "I really mean that. You've really mellowed out in this world," mumbled Shukaku, his raccoon ears flicking at Kurama's touch. "And it's good to see you back, Kurama ni." Kurama chuckled behind his lips. He promised to himself to be nicer to Shukaku in this new life. It was a bonus that the tanuki wasn't as rabid as he was in the elemental nations, otherwise there would be pools of sand all over Kyoto. "Yeah," Kurama said, gesturing Shukaku to the front. "Walk with me, little brother. Let's catch up." Shukaku raised a brow but complied anyway. Side by side, the former biju descended down the steps of the palace back to the city. Soon, they found themselves walking in the streets of Kyoto, blending in with the humans and yokai bustling through the streets to meet their everyday chores. "Do you have any idea what's going on with Matabi and Son Goku?" Kurama asked. Shukaku shrugged. "Not much. Son Goku lives far out in the continent of Asia with the local yokai there. He rarely visits Kyoto. Something about becoming the next Sun Wukong. Matabi is in better touch with me as her clan is still part of Kyoto and the Shinto pantheon as a whole. But with this cold war going on with the devils, She has to devote more of her attention at her home in the underworld to protect her family in case of a preemptive attack. Honestly, with how these devils act with everyone else in the world, I wouldn't put it past them. Since then, I haven't seen her in months. Kurama stayed in silent, ingesting the news about the rest of his siblings. Out of the two, it seemed Matabi had it worse, as she has bonded to the Nekosho clan she has been born in. More pressure was put on her since she is the heiress of the Nekosho clan and would fight tooth, claw, and fire to keep her family safe, war be damned. As for Son Goku, it was interesting that he was considered to become the next Monkey King. In this world, his brother was born as a descendant of Sun Wukong, and Kurama knew enough of the Buddha's mythical legend that shook the entire Hindu Buddhism pantheon, going as far as to challenge the original Buddha himself, the first man who ascended to godhood through enlightenment. A being that Asura himself had his respect towards, and that was saying a lot. Everything looks so grim all of a sudden, Kurama said. Is there any way we can help with Matabi? Try to ease the burden? Since the Nekosho live in the underworld, they could be swarmed by devils at any moment. Shukaku answered. Matabi's been using genjutsu and this world's yojutsu for defense, but nothing to actually repel intruders. And it's not like they can just leave. For some reason, the Nekosho view their place in the underworld as sacred, and that just doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Maybe a barrier around their home would work, but we don't exactly have something like that unless you somehow learned magic or fuinjutsu. Kurama looked away so his brother couldn't see the complicated expression on his face. Technically, he did know fuinjutsu from his first host Mito Uzumaki, one of the strongest of her time and the greatest seal master in Konoha's history. Unlike Kushina and Naruto to an extent, she allowed the Biju to see the outside world through her senses. This allowed him to see Mito working on her fuinjutsu extensively, and he remembered every single calligraphy of the sealing arts that she wrote on paper. Unfortunately, while Kurama had a vivid memory of Mito's fuinjutsu seals, he lacked the creativity to utilize them in his own style. At best, he can replicate the fuinjutsu seals Mito made, but can't make any himself. I'll think of something. Kurama muttered. Better be good. Shukaku replied. From what I've heard of devils, I am always expecting for them to teleport and try to lord over me as the lesser being, as they would say. Why haven't they tried that? Kurama wondered. You know, teleporting straight into Kyoto. Shukaku scratched his head. I asked that, but everyone, especially the pious ones, say it's because of Amaterasu's protection upon the land or some shit like that. Honestly, I am inclined to believe it when I saw her. She feels a lot like that bitch Kaguya. But even when using Indra's pinwheel Ipops gave us, I can't even get a sense what I am seeing from her. It's even weirder when I use Senjutsu, cause I actually feel her presence in the natural energy. It's so freaking weird. Japan is not just her territory, it's part of her domain. Kurama added. It's how the power of deities work. They don't need to exert energy and instead simply use their will to do what they need, provided that it is in the scope of their authority. Amaterasu is the chief goddess of the Shinto pantheon, so her influence over Japan is absolute. What she's done is prevent what she deems outsiders from entering her territory, not without force at least, and still that will catch her attention. After, it's not called the land of the rising sun for no reason. You seem to know a lot how these things with deities and their powers work, Shukaku noted. Kurama curled his lips. I've been living with the strongest god there is in this world for over 10 years. I was bound to pick up some facts. As for why you feel Amaterasu in Japan's natural energy, remember there were never really any gods in the elemental nations. It makes sense you would do so since the land is a part of her will. Shukaku growled. Damn, it's so fucking confusing. At least back when we were Biju it was never that complicated, even when we're sealed into humans for some stupid way to use our power. Now we are stuck in this world with so much bullshit with fucking gods and magic. I am gonna put sand in my brain if there's somehow a magic for girls that make them glitter and sparkle like a damn rainbow because of some bullshit excuse of friendship. Then better get used to it, little brother, Kurama said with a snicker, patting the shorter man's back. This is our home now. A chance for us to live how we want. I for one want to use it to protect this place that has given me the closest to a childhood. Oh, Shukaku said, a smirk growing on his lips. It wouldn't be because of a certain golden vixen, is it? Kurama didn't answer. The large kitsune simply stopped in the middle of the street awfully still. He was just ahead of Shukaku that the tanuki was unable to see his face and the many expressions it was making. His mind suddenly went back to Yusaka, remembering their short but heartfelt reunion. The kitsune's mind was focused on the wonderful smile on her face, full of relief to see him again, and the soft giggles that tingled something in Kurama's heart. Shukaku continued, his tone teasing. "Oh yes, it is quite noble for you to put yourself in to protect these people you hardly know. But it certainly can't be because of a beautiful golden wonder that has caught your eye, You definitely weren't coming back to see the kitsune girl you've played and laughed with as you grew up. But now you're finally back only to be dazzled to see how much she has blossomed into one hell of a woman. I mean, seriously, have you seen the pair of giants on her chest? She has to have back muscles strong enough to cave in blocks of steel if she can stand as." Kurama's hands snapped to Shukaku's mouth, shutting it closed from speaking another word. The tanuki glared at being interrupted so rudely and trailed his eyes up only to widen, meeting Kurama's eyes. His slit crimson pupils morphed into the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, glowing an ominous bloody red, intensifying the death stare Shukaku was receiving. It made him feel so much smaller in comparison, and he wasn't talking about when they were still tailed beasts. "It would be kind of you, Shukaku," Kurama spoke lowly, leaning into Shukaku's ear, "to not make any more crass comments about Yusaka. Otherwise, I would be obliged to show all that I have learned to their full effect." An audible gulp was Shukaku's response, followed by repeatedly nodding in agreement. After a few seconds staring down at his brother, Kurama let go of Shukaku and cancelled his M's back to his normal eyes. A part of him was cursing himself for lashing out at Shukaku like that, but Kurama was not going to stand there and let the tanuki say things like that about Yusaka. Certainly not about her breasts. Kurama didn't want to have another perverted degenerate like the ones two of his hosts have been surrounded by. Thinking back to Matabi, Kurama could not keep down his worry. His sister was stuck all the way in the underworld, practically surrounded by devils. Yokai didn't have any real means of dimensional travel, like how devils teleport themselves with their magic circles, unless a yokai had the capability of using magic, which were in the minority as a people whose power derived from chakra. Their most used form of teleportation between worlds was gods like Amaterasu and Shinigami setting up a tube-like tunnel, and this was available to the Nekosho clan exclusively given their home in the underworld. He could possibly use his eyes to transfer himself to the underworld, but it was a shot in the dark since Kurama has never been to the underworld. "Matabi, hope you are doing all right," Kurama thought, trying to direct his mind to another topic such as how to spend the rest of his day. Nekosho Estate. Underworld. Within the underworld, it may seem like Earth's night and day, but that was the result of the four Satans changing the sky through highly advanced illusion magic to resemble day and night cycles. It was put into effect when the new devil regime started reincarnating other people to heal their population. Once long ago, the skies used to roil in dark hues of purple and sometimes blood red if there were lightning storms. There were days where the underworld was truly an untamed landscape, just a step away from becoming what hell was. At least, that was what Matabi would hear from her mother, Fujimai, when she went on a rant about the old days. She did not care at all really about the old days of what the underworld looked like. Instead, her priority was keeping her clan, her new family, safe. Relations between Shinto and the underworld have worsened, and with the Nekosho clan bordering the devil's territory, her family was in the red zone for a potential start of war. All of this, starting from tensions built up years ago, would be putting a lot of pressure on a child who would become the next head of the clan. Fortunately, Matabi was far from the mentality of a child on the day she was reborn, and she took this on with her head held high. Fellow Nekosho within the estate would say these troubling times have forged the young girl they once knew into a strong and beautiful yokai woman. The former two-tailed Biju would be found in her private quarters in a very Spartan room with wooden floors and paper walls. There in the center, Matabi sat in a meditative stance surrounded by candles lit in blue flames. Resting on her lap was a sheathed Japanese blade almost as long to be considered an odashi, built with a dark purple handle and a circular guard, and sheathed within a wooden scabbard colored a scorched red. She had blossomed from the little girl into a beautiful woman to make heads turn. Her dark blue kimono wrapped in a yellow obi held close to her hourglass figure. From her neckline, the garment split in a V to give a peek to her well-developed breasts that surpassed a certain blonde the former Biju used to know when Yugito of Kumo was her host. Matabi was not simply gorgeous, but obviously athletic with a flat belly and strong limbs coiled with trained muscle. Her hair was a startling dark blue like a pond's reflection of the night sky and grew to reach her wide hips. The Nekosha's face had matured to develop features full of grace similar to a royal with a blue bang of her hair dangling over her left eye. A pair of cat ears on top of her head twitched occasionally, their similar color blending in with her hair. From her behind stretching from the confines of her kimono was a set of 9 cattails, denoting her as the most powerful Nekosho in history. It was enough of a cause for celebration in both the Nekomata and Nekosho households as Matabi had become the first to have grown 9 tails at all and at such a young age before she even turned 30. Matabi couldn't wait to rub this in Kurama's face. He was going to be scathing and so confused when he realizes he no longer is the only one with 9 tails. Currently, Matabi was in a deep trance of senjutsu as noted by the paint-like markings of onyx on her face, making patterns of 3 prongs on her forehead and branching out from her eyes. It was odd that the underworld's and Earth's natural energy were the same as she had expected. Using senjutsu in the underworld would be much more chaotic to control. It was as if the 2 dimensions were merely reflections of each other. She was using the art to stretch her senses across not just the Nekosho household but also the acres of land they owned. In this way, Matabi's senses monitored the borders of her family's territory, always on the lookout if the devils made an alarming approach. Devils could try and teleport themselves directly into the estate, but Matabi's use of flooding the land with her chakra through genjutsu and yojutsu made such ways impossible with the interfering energy. Occasionally, Matabi would get blips of activity, possibly spies from the devil's side. She could go on with this for days, monitoring her home to make sure of its safety and only forced out by worried family members. Such actions always made Matabi surprised, having not received strong familial affections in her long life as a tailed beast. It made Matabi treasure these people all the more, reincarnated or not. A knock on her door loosened Matabi's concentration, but not so much she completely lost her hold on sage mode. Mismatching eyes of yellow and green blinked open and turned to the entrance where she noticed a shadow beyond, waiting patiently. Matabi sighed, knowing what it was about based on how empty her stomach felt and the dryness of her throat. She nearly skipped a meal, a very bad habit she was making ever since starting this watch on her territory's border. "Come in," Matabi called after clearing her throat so her voice didn't sound so hoarse. The doors slid open, revealing her visitor to be a fellow Nekosho of the estate and, like most in the clan, was female. In supernatural terms, the Nekosho was ordinary but still very beautiful, with flowing brown hair, a heart-shaped face, blue eyes, and a sizable bust. Her garments were ordinary with only a kimono of a white and black scheme, and like most Nekosho she possessed cat ears and 2 tails swinging behind her back. In her hands was a tray of food consisting of freshly roasted fish and fresh water. Matabi graced her fellow Nekosho with a kind smile, beckoning her inside. Despite the Nekosha's youthful appearance matching the heiress, the apparent servant was much older. The former Biju can attest to that, as this very Nekosho of the clan played a part in raising her as she grew up, becoming like an older sister. In truth, the Nekosho was over 50 years old, but the immortality perks of yokai were guaranteed to always keep a graceful appearance. "Evening, Lady Taju." The Nekosho greeted in a polite bow. "You missed lunch, so I've brought it here for your convenience." "How many times do I have to say it, Kahori?" Matabi said, getting into a more comfortable position. "Just call me Matabi." "That would be uncouth of me, Lady Taju, as you are the heiress to our clan." Kahori replied back as professional, but Matabi could feel the amused smile she was hiding. Matabi pouted. Kahori ne-chan, you don't have to be so stuck up. Relax a little." "Not when I have a duty to perform as your servant, Lady Taju." Kahori shot back with that same professional tone. "Besides, isn't hypocritical on your part? You've kept yourself cooped up in here for hours on end without coming out for food. I, for one, believe you are the one that needs to relax. Don't try deny it, my lady." Matabi made an exasperated groan at Kahori's persistence. She had the most insight into what Matabi felt at any given time. The former Biju simply could not hide it from this woman who has dedicated herself to protect her. As Matabi sighed in defeat, Kahori took that as her cue to approach the future matriarch of the Nekosho clan. She kneeled down to Matabi's level and presented the platter before her. Once Matabi eyed the food before her, Her stomach growled in want and she had no choice but to swipe it close to her, digging into the delicious fish her feline nature adored. So good, Matabi squealed in her head. As being of her age that was mostly formless energy, taste was a new pleasure for the Biju in this new life. Thank you, Matabi said in a pause before proceeding to devour the jasmine rice soaked in shellfish curry. For a moment, Kahora's professional expression broke into a worried frown before she spoke. Lady Taju, I really must insist that you take a break from these long watches with your senjutsu. We barely see you outside of this room while you have all of your senses focused on our borders alert for an attack. I know you mean the best of us, but please you must stop. At least for a moment. Matabi stopped in her motions as she finished gulping down her water. Her lackadaisical smile diminished into a miserable frown. Her cat ears drooped down on her head and her 9 tails slumped down to the floor. In this state, Kahori saw her charge for what she truly was. A woman carrying too much weight, but could not stop due to the love of her family. Kahori saw the crushing fear flashing in her mismatched eyes that would then occasionally flash into a crimson-black pattern Matabi called her Sharingan, glowing with untold power. I can't. Matabi whimpered. I can't stop. Not when you're all in so much danger. You're not just a clan, you're my family, and I am not going to relax when you could be threatened at any moment. Not when you could all be swarmed the instant as a start to a war. But war hasn't happened yet. Kahori retorted, taking Matabi's hands gently, and even if the devils attack, the defenses you have set up will hinder them long enough for reinforcements to come and the non-combatants of the clan to escape to Kyoto. All of us in the clan know how much you want to protect us, but you can't do that if you exhaust yourself like this. A scoff almost escaped Matabi's lips. Exhaustion wasn't in her vocabulary. With her chakra reserves even greater than they were when she was a tailed beast, Matabi could go on for weeks on end using senjutsu and her chakra to rejuvenate herself. Though a part of her mind knew that was not healthy to do so, especially with a body of flesh and blood. Then tell me this, Kahori, Matabi said. If I am not here and the devils attack, do you believe you can last? Do you think the clan can survive against the force of one of their pillar families, much less their main military? Can you say you can live through that? Kahori could not hide the grimace on her face, struggling to answer her mistress. Nekoshis were a stronger variant of Nekomata yokai and were greater practitioners of senjutsu and other chakra arts. However, the clan was small in its numbers, not counting those that have not settled in the estate, and their powers were limited in their destructive capability compared to the magics of devils that were mostly designed to inflict damage. An invasion from devils was always the fear of the clan living in the underworld. Only when Matabi was born and grew up into the sheer powerhouse realized by the clan, expressing levels of chakra to rival god-class beings, use of it in a destructive manner with the elements, and the bizarre powers that her eyes had. To the clan as a whole, Matabi was a blessing from Takamagahara born to bring a new age to the Nekosho clan, along with unique individuals such as the last Tanuki, Shukaku, and the descendant of Sun Wukong, Son Goku. The problem was that she was one person capable of warding invasions upon the Nekoshis while the rest of the clan were not so well versed in the art of warfare. I don't believe so, milady, Kahori admitted. As strong as we are, we cannot hold ourselves if an entire noble family of the devils would descend upon us. Not without your power, of course. But that doesn't mean you have to keep watch like this. If an invasion ever occurs, we are not going to forsake our lives. What I am saying, Matabi, is that you can take a break, and that I and the rest of the clan are insisting you do so for your own health. Matabi's left eye and cat ears twitched as the only sign of her irritation. She could not find a way to argue back, or rather she didn't have the heart to. This was not just Kahori but the entire clan that wanted to repay Matabi by relieving the 9-tailed Nekosho of her self-imposed duty. Such were the complications of family. Fine. Relented Matabi, the flames of the candles burning out and the senjutsu marks on her body disappearing. I will take a break. Not so fast, milady. Kahori interrupted with a raised finger. We believe that you deserve not just a break, but also a vacation for extended time to relax. Matabi widened his eyes. Now hold on, the clan viewed this not as a gift, but something desiring to your health. Kahori continued, raising her voice. Your overall mentality and physical health is also a priority to the clan as you are the heiress and the most powerful Nekosho in history. And to be quite honest, you really do need a vacation. Matabi growled, throwing her hands up in frustration. Okay. Then I'll just hang around the more recreational parts of the estate. Maybe play with the children and help out with the crops. Nope. Kahori denied, making Matabi do a face fault. With your track record, it can't be left to chance that you will suddenly find yourself occupied checking your yojutsu placements over and over. I believe a trip to Japan will do you more good. Then who is going to look after the clan while I am gone? Matabi exclaimed, gripping handfuls of her hair. Your mother, of course. Kahori answered. She still is the clan head after all. While you may argue about her pacifist views, we both know that Lady Fujimai looks out for the best of the clan. A feline's hiss escaped Matabi's lips and her 9 tails stood on end. Coming to a peak, Matabi gave a strangled cry, throwing her head back and lying down on the floor. A sweat drop appeared on Kahori's neck, having witnessed this comical fit when Matabi was quite pissed when she was younger. Where would I even go? Matabi said through gritted teeth. She didn't know how to do a vacation, never actually understanding the concept of it. Why not Kyoto? Kahori suggested. It is quite lovely this time of year. Lots of yokai to mingle with and perhaps you might be able to see a grand wedding that will happen soon. Kyoto, huh? Matabi muttered, her gaze aimless for a moment. She hasn't been back there for several months, and the only worth in going there was Shukaku. Kurama and son Goku were across the planet with the latter only having been seen once in the 10 years apart. Matabi didn't just hope. She dreamed to see all of her siblings, yet she was always disappointed not to see Kurama or son Goku there. It wasn't like Shukaku was insufferable as the Tanuki had mellowed out and made decent company for Matabi. But the whole time Matabi really missed having all of her siblings at once. They may not be related by blood, but their origins kept them as close. You win. Matabi said, lifting herself till she was standing a full height of 56. I'll go pack my things and enjoy this gift of a vacation. But, I swear, Kahori, if I hear that. Do not worry so much. Kahori assured, smiling with a waving hand. We are in a cold war for now. If in the slim chance we are attacked, you have Shinigami to send you down here as soon as possible. After all, your pact as his priestess grants the lands of our claim his watch as well. There is no reason to be paranoid. To me, there is no such thing as being paranoid. Matabi retorted, picking up her sword and securing it to her back with a strap. Though, it would be nice to see the devil's faces when they meet the ire of the Lord of Death himself. Kahori chuckled. My, that would be interesting to watch. Matabi sighed. I guess I should get myself ready. Allow me to collect your possessions, milady. Kahori said, standing up to leave before giving her charge a wink. After all, this is your vacation, so relax. Matabi gave a grunt of acknowledgement, letting Kahori leave the room to herself once again. It was just now that Matabi realized how stiff her joints were after meditating in sage mode for so long. As a powerful yokai, she needed to move more often as her feline instincts demanded. Perhaps she could really use this vacation for just a week. Yet at the same time Matabi could not get rid of this gut feeling that something incredible was going to happen on this trip to Kyoto. And she couldn't help smile about it. At least it won't be boring, I guess, Matabi thought. Deep in the lands of Asia where the mountains were so numerous akin to a sea of peaks reaching to the heavens, the ground rumbled ominously. The sky above was a smoky shade of red from gathering thunderclouds. Gathering the afterglow of a setting sun. Turbulent winds made the trees down below and swept lesser plants into the air while the animals followed their instincts to run for safety. Then suddenly the earth started to bleed its blood upon a mountain noticeably older than its brethren. Molten magma blistered its sides and spewed out into rivers flowing down below. The whole mountain visibly shook as the quakes grew stronger until in a massive bang the entire top exploded in ash and magma. If it were a normal volcanic eruption, so much more ash would cloud the sky and the blown magma would fall upon the ground like hellfire. They were present, but not so much than what should be expected from a massive buildup of magma within the mountain. In comparison, the rain of ash and magma was a drizzle to a natural volcano. No, something caused this preemptive eruption. And suddenly the great cloud of ash was swept away by wind pressure and with it came a great crack. It was greater than that of the great bang of the eruption and more continuous than a crack of thunder. This was no sound made through a force of nature, but a living creature so mighty it commanded the earth itself. So when the ash was fully dispersed, this beast of legend was revealed in all of his glory. The great, slender body of a reptilian creature rose from the top of the fiery mountain, completely uncaring of the magma bathing its form. It was enormous in size, with its body that has already risen to be as tall as the nearby mountains, with still more underneath. A pair of arms just near the head stretched out with digits of a lizard. Scales each the size of regular human shimmered a radiant orange glow, and its head was the form of a vicious serpent of sharp teeth, a pair of black horns, and blazing red eyes. He was majestic as much as he was a terrifying sight to behold, as all dragons are. His name is Fa Lung, the underworld dragon. A beast of fire and untold destruction, whose very movements within the earth could reshape the land. In ages faded into myth, he was famed to be a guardian of treasures beneath from the natural world and those born of man. Most importantly, he was the safe keeper of one of the Baozu, the wish-granting pearl, and one of China's most sacred treasures. His emergence meant the devastation of the land in molten rock and black ash. But those times of his destruction on the world of man were gone long ago. Centuries have passed and his very existence turned into a myth. As a result, there were rarely any humans that dared to find the hoards of treasure he guarded within the earth. The only exception were those of the supernatural sort, but none who dared were ever strong enough to challenge him. Given his size, even an evil dragon would be hard-pressed to defeat Fa Lung, given his immense size. His slender body was great enough to wrap the entirety of the mountains and reach the heavens above. What roused from the molten earth was no thief of his buried treasures. Rather, his eyes tried to scan for a familiar blip of red in the landscape. His ears were the first to pick up the whistle of an object heading towards him from above. Before he could roll his eyes up in its direction, he was instead met with a blow that swayed his head away. The impact alone was like a crack of thunder, and Fa Lung's body collapsed down to the roots of the mountain. His enormous weight on the earth unleashed a tremor through the land. "That good enough for you, old lizard?" exclaimed the jovial voice of Fa Lung's attacker. The owner of the voice was a man of the great stature, of both an impressive height of over 6 feet and the build of a bodybuilder. Contrary to what be needed in such conditions near a freshly erupted volcano, he lacked any article of clothing to cover his upper body, leaving a torso of muscle as solid as stone. Black baggy pants tied up by red obi covered his legs and waist, while his feet wore sandals. He had blood-red hair grown into a spiky mess, with 2 bangs framing his face and a stray spike looping above his forehead. His eyes were the same color, but strangely enough, each contained 3 tomo spinning around the pupil. In his hands was a staff made of redwood topped with golden beads. Yet the most peculiar feature of the man was the crimson fur tail wagging from his back. This was Son Goku, the latest descendant of Sun Wukong and the upcoming candidate as the next Wukong Buddha, and most importantly the reincarnated 4-tailed beast. And he was having quite the blast fighting Fa Lung. The aforementioned dragon opened his red eyes that glared slits at the monkey yokai. He lifted his massive weight off the ground as if the blow had never happened. Yet Goku kept his eyes on the cracked scales where his fist made contact with Fa Lung's left cheek. "Every time it comes to this, I always regret agreeing with that old monkey shit to spar with you," Fa Lung said, his deep voice reverberating through the mountains. "Don't pretend you ain't an old shit yourself," Goku rebutted, twirling his staff around till he settled into a fighting stance. "And don't tell me you don't enjoy this. It must be been boring without anyone to knock you around." Fa Lung responded in a snort, releasing literal clouds of steam. But with Son Goku's Sharingan, the monkey yokai picked up the small tugging on the dragon's lips. Grinning toothily, Son Goku stared down at the looming dragon that ruled the landscape. The tension was broken when Son Goku took a mighty leap to strike Fa Lung head on with only staff in hand. Yet the dragon met the charge in a viper-like strike, intending on mowing Son Goku down back to fiery earth. This action, however, was what Goku wanted Fa Lung to do. Instead of following through with his motion, Goku flipped just at the moment Fa Lung would have rammed him. The only thing Fa Lung could do was track Son Goku as he was no over his snout and headed towards his horns. Goku momentarily stopped himself by grabbing onto one of Fa Lung's story-sized horns to allow the monkey yokai to run up the dragon's serpentine body. He knew that Fa Lung would not be able to attack if it meant hurting himself. "Don't be so cocky, monkey brat," roared Fa Lung. Fa Lung turned his head around till he could clearly see Goku. He opened his maw and belched out an inferno with the heat to melt rock and stone. Goku was blasted off to crash back to Earth, but Fu Lung did not let up his fire until the monkey yokai was being submerged in magma. To most beings, this was an instant death, but Goku had always been resistant to extreme temperatures. It was the same since his last life when he lived as a tailed beast in areas of high volcanic activity. Soon, Goku crawled himself out of the pooling magma. Nothing on his person showed in any way that he was swimming in lava. Even his hair was perfectly fair, albeit was going to sport cooling pebbles trapped in the crimson locks. His staff and clothes were a given since they were blessed to not be nearly indestructible unless faced with some of the world's most devastating powers. Looking above, Goku saw Fu Lung about to prepare another breath attack. Goku made his stand by rapidly twirling his staff just as the flames came down upon him. Amazingly, the inferno was being blown out of the way and kept Goku untouched by the flames. Not to be outdone, Fu Lung made a dive upon the monkey yokai, but at the last second dug into the ground in front of Goku and used his head as a plow to send the earth with Goku into the air. It was far easier than for Fu Lung to rear his head up and use the mass of his head to ram Goku. The yokai in question felt he was being used as a pinball as gravity refused to pull him down, and the full body ache of pain Fu Lung striking his whole body was not helping. It was thanks to his potent chakra granting him extra durability and regeneration on top of his trained endurance that he was only suffering bruises. "Not gonna play nice? Fine by me," exclaimed Goku, pointing his staff at the incoming Fu Lung. "Grow, Nyoibo." Thus the true nature of Goku's staff revealed itself as the latest divine make of Sun Wukong's possession. Like the first Nyoibo, the entirety of the staff was forged from a whole mountain all condensed into the polearm. And with it the magical ability to extend the staff to indefinite sizes. Upon Goku's command, the staff extended out to a length unfathomable to even wield even when the polearm itself became wider than could be grasped fully. Yet it did not deter the reincarnated Biju as Nyoibo struck Fu Lung in the head during its extension. A mental command had Nyoibo stop its growth and began to wield the staff to continue his duel with the dragon. For Goku, it was as natural as using a regular staff with Nyoibo's current size, and he held it back to prepare for a sidelong swing. And so a titanic duel commenced as Goku gave a roar swinging the mighty Nyoibo, in no better terms, to swat at the head of the giant dragon. In a surprising show of dexterity, Fu Lung angled his head so the enlarged staff was parried one of the dragon's great black horns. The impact thundered out a gong-like sound as if a giant bell had been struck, and its shrill scream going out for miles. Son Goku used a pole jump to keep himself in the air, and with the absolute size of Nyoibo, he would basically never touch the ground. The weight of Nyoibo did nothing to hamper his movements as he spun it around for another attack as if the staff weighed nothing on the yokai's person. He went for an upward strike near the base of Fu Lung's neck, but the gigantic Chinese dragon tracked its movements and twisted his head around to meet the staff with his own horns yet again. A visible shockwave reverberated from the clash, pushing both fighters back and obliterating the earth below them into a crater. Due to his size advantage, Fu Lung recovered faster than Son Goku and lunged his whole body forward to ram the yokai. The reincarnated Biju clicked his tongue and switched his hold on Nyoibo in a horizontal position to brace himself for the coming blow. Fu Lung's massive head, so immense in size that Goku could fit in one of his nostrils, struck with the immeasurable strength against the staff of Nyoibo. While the staff proved its invincibility without getting a crack against the dragon's strength, Son Goku definitely felt the blow through his limbs. His face reddened as all the muscles in his body bulged to brace against Fu Lung's raw power in order to not have his bones crack. It was only a small moment as Fu Lung struck, and the result was Son Goku being sent flying yet again. His hasty defense was not in vain though. It allowed Goku to get his bearings and plan his next move. A thought came to him in using the higher echelon abilities of his Sharingan in its Mangekyo form. He shook the thought away. Goku did not want to use the gifted power of his father unless the strength he earned was not enough. There were still more skills Goku can show off before the show is over. With a thought and a pulse of chakra through his body, Son Goku's free fall in the air was totally stopped. It was not that he was keeping himself still, but rather that right now Son Goku was using chakra-based flight. A trump card Son Goku had managed to replicate from the bare memories of Roshi watching the Tsuchikage take flight himself. Years toiled in theory and then practice have granted the reincarnated Biju the power of flight, something he never had in his previous life. There was not a day Son Goku did not enjoy flying with his own power, and it made him giddy to rub his new power in Kurama's face. It was all too easy for the monkey yokai to zip behind Fu Lung's guard and slam his staff onto the side of the dragon's face. The dragon lurched from the blow and crashed into a mountain. Just the weight of his head and neck completely collapsed the mountain, burying the dragon's head in giant piles of stone and earth. Such destruction brought up a huge cloud of smoke and dust from the incoming lava flow in the valley. Son Goku waited in the air for Fu Lung to make a move, but oddly the dragon was not coming back up. He knew that his latest blow was nowhere near enough to knock out the whole WYRM. The yokai narrowed his eyes as his Sharingan sharpened in clarity to pierce through the cloud obscuring the mountain. When the ash started to settle for his Sharingan to pierce through, Son Goku saw the serpentine body still moving forward, yet Fu Lung's head was still nowhere in sight. But where could he have gone where I can't see him? Son Goku thought. But the only he can remain unseen if he's buried in the ground. As soon as Son Goku made that conclusion did Fu Lung finally reveal himself, surfacing from the ground right below him. Magma erupted like a fountain upon the dragon's ascension as he made his way up to Son Goku, jaws open to gnash the yokai in his teeth. Fire breathed out of the maw, which Son Goku flipped over to avoid the flames. However, it left him vulnerable for Fu Lung to ram straight like a striking viper. This time, there was no defense to hamper the blow and Son Goku's entire body was planted upon the face of the dragon. He was carried through the air for Fu Lung to ram his head straight through mountains and lakes of lava with Son Goku at the forefront. Fu Lung finished his onslaught by roughly jerking his head to send Son Goku crashing into the charred ground. "Don't get up, brat!" boomed the voice of Fu Lung, his great serpentine body looming over the valley. "I'll just pummel you into the ground and bury you in the fires of the underworld." Son Goku didn't respond at first as he picked himself up with a groan. He flexed his shoulders to wear out the pain and then rubbed his jaw to make sure it was settled correctly. His cheeks twitched when Goku found something in his throat. Holding out a hand in front, he spat out to reveal to him a molar that had gotten loose from the blow along with a few droplets of blood. It was bound to get lost sooner or later, Son Goku thought nonchalantly, chucking away the tooth without care. "It'll grow back eventually." "That all you got, old lizard?" Son Goku mocked. "I can do this all day." Fu Lung's lips curled into a vicious snarl, his irritation at the yokai's endurance in this battle turning to rage. From his maw he unleashed a great roar that shook the earth, causing sudden eruptions of magma from the earth. He charged down at Son Goku for another ram, but this time Goku did not dodge. In the small time frame of Fu Lung closing the distance, Son Goku was steadying himself and kept his spirit to a sudden calmness. The body was open to the wonder of nature and the world responded in fervor. It was with a great bang when Fu Lung made contact with Son Goku, reducing the earth around them into a dust cloud. Yet Fu Lung was stopped in his tracks, and try as he might he could not even budge forward. For a dragon of such immense size and strength, it came as a shock to him to meet an opposition that did not move before him. What was more shocking was who was holding him back. There at Fu Lung's snout was Goku holding back the entirety of the dragon's strength with his own bare hands. His feet were firmly planted into the ground that they sunk down to the ankles. Despite the immeasurable feat, there was no visible strain from Son Goku in holding the dragon back. What was present were strange tattoo lines of crimson red going down his eyes in jagged lines. More lined his limbs in patterns resembling blooming fire on his pectorals and bolts of lighting on his arms and legs. Converging on his forehead were the red tattoos coming into a swirl. "How?" roared Fu Lung, but Son Goku was not even deterred by the dragon's voice. "Senjutsu bitch!" Son Goku responded in glee. This was the manifestation of Son Goku's master of Senjutsu. And with it came the increase of his already massive superhuman strength to the point he could stop Fu Lung in his rage, as well as punch him back with earth-shattering force as Son Goku dealt a lethal uppercut to Fu Lung. The very release of so much power caused an updraft that threatened to shoot Goku up as well. Fu Lung on the other hand was sent careening across the destroyed valley until his head crashed into a mountain. "Man, I bet I can bench press a mountain with this," Son Goku said to himself, flexing his muscles with the new strength flowing through his body. "Yeah, definitely gotta try that." The now pile of rubble and rock that used to be a mountain exploded in a shower of boulders as Fu Lung flung himself to freedom. His orange eyes were brimming red from rage and hurt pride, all solely aimed down at the smug monkey yokai. Like a coiled viper, Fu Lung sprang his body forth as flames spewed from behind his lips ready to be unleashed. Son Goku met his charge with a grin, standing his ground in a firm stance of hung gar, and ready to fist to throw forward. The milliseconds ticked by for the next encounter between the two titans, which would entail further destruction on the land. Now that is quite enough. Only at the last second of contact, a voice broke through between them. Son Goku blinked on reflex at the sudden voice, and when he opened them he found his entire body too stiff to move. Just in front of him was the looming form of Fu Lung, also still with eyes wide full of the same surprise. Their eyes trailed down to where a finger was pressed against the two fighters, somehow stopping whatever powerful momentum between Fu Lung and Son Goku. It was not pure strength holding them back, but an undeniable force of calm stopping them in their tracks despite all the power Son Goku was about to throw out. Trailing down the limbs came to the owner that stopped to be the original Sun Wukong with his lips settled in a cheeky grin. Yeesh, you two need to tone it down. Wukong admonished, raising himself up by his own tail. I mean, look what you did to the valley. Learn to take it down a notch. Sun Wukong gave a sharp flick with his hands, staggering both Son Goku back and making Fu Lung flinch. Clasping his hands, Wukong began to gather senjutsu from the planet at such an astonishing rate Son Goku swore he could see the planet's energy gathering to his form in rivers of green light. It condensed into an aura surrounding Wukong's body, who then placed a hand on the scorched ground. Then Son Goku saw the valley change instantly as he saw waves of the fluorescent green pulse into the earth. Before his eyes, the land healed itself seemingly magically, with the lakes and rivers of lava quickly cooling into new ground and the ash-covered ground sporting sprouts of newly born flora among the wastes of nature. There, that's better, Wukong said with a satisfied smile until he eyed the giant dragon. But don't expect to always clean up, Fu Lung. I requested your services in helping Son Goku's training, but I ain't helping you if Indra or the Jade Palace takes offense to this destruction. Understandable, replied Fu Lung. For 3 years, it's been more than me and the brat are sparring. He's quite strong, stronger than you were when you were at that age. Yet no less the degenerate I also once was. Wukong added under his breath, momentarily reminiscing his younger, reckless days. Alright then, I need to take my successor over for a moment. Fu Lung, you can go slither back and sleep in that sea of magma you're so fond of. You still have your duty in protecting the Fire Pearl. Not to worry, Fu Lung boasted, smoke hissing out of his nostrils from his exhalation. I still have my lower body resting over the treasure within my home as we speak. No idiot is taking it away without making my claw itch. Son Goku's eyes widened in shock and he made a quick glance at the dragon. Despite their battle, Fu Lung only showed his massive slender body, his pair of arms, and, of course, his head adorned in a crown of black horns. It still did make Goku aghast just how massive the dragon truly was. Even as his body was stretched over the mountains, there was still his lower body deep within the earth that had yet to reveal itself to the surface. I'll be on my way then, Fu Lung concluded. The earth groaned from the movements of his massive weight. Ever so slowly, Fu Lung slithered his body across the valley and down the very first mountain he erupted from. As soon as his head disappeared down the smoking top, the land entered an eerie silence. Sunlight pierced through the darkness, finally dissipating with the battle has ended, highlighting the green dots of new life growing from the ground thanks to Wukong's sage arts. Both users in sage arts glanced at each other at direct eye contact. In an instant, Wukong sprung into action faster than Goku could react to, especially with his elder visage. In a fluid motion, Wukong snatched the Nioi boy out of the other yokai's hands and the Buddha used it to whack it hard on the former Biju's forehead. Goku gave a cry of pain, holding onto the top of his head where the skin was starting to redden from where Nioi boy hit his skull. Ow! Goku whined, rubbing the sore spot. What did you do that for, you old fuck? Because you're a reckless idiot for a sage, that's what, Wukong bit back, gesturing to the scarred valley. Look at the mess you did. All of this unnecessary destruction because you couldn't give a damn to be careful. Oi, don't put the blame on me, Goku argued. It's all of Fu Lung's fault for making all that lava shit all over the place. You can't exactly expect the place in one piece when I am fighting a giant fucking dragon. Goku's heated rebuttal was met with another whack of the Nyoibo on the same spot. Ow. Then you should have focused less on enjoying the fight and more on preventing collateral damage. Wukong cried in exasperation before releasing a defeated sigh. You're missing the point here, Goku. I let you fight Fa Lung, but it wasn't just to improve your ability to advance your sage training. What are you talking about? Son Goku wondered. Look around you, Wukong said, waving his arm to gesture to the valley. You want to know what I see? I see a land that was beautiful, full of trees that have seen centuries of this world, flowers blooming in the light, and the many creatures living out their lives, from the insects buzzing through the air to the critters climbing the trees. And yet all that beauty was rendered into nothingness just moments ago by Fa Lung and you. Where are you going with this? Son Goku inquired, but his voice was softer and lacked any heat. Wukong sighed. Goku, my boy, if you are to succeed me as a sage in the next Wukong, you have to act like a sage. I may have taught you senjutsu, but the arts of the sage were never supposed to be used for battle. I want you to see the world beyond yourself. Look past your own power to what is around you instead. Cherish the beauty of nature and work to preserve it. That is the duty of a sage. Until you learn that, I can't really call you one even if you can use senjutsu. As Wukong continued his lecture, berating, Goku was hit with a sudden feeling of nostalgia. His eyes became listless for a moment to memories long ago. Long before shinobi villages were set up, when he was a juvenile as the five-tailed beast. He had recently gone outside playing with his siblings and had gotten to the point Goku threw a tantrum that made the nearby mountains explode from lava. The sudden eruption injured his siblings, and Hagoromo had spared to give Goku a lecture to be more careful with not just his siblings but also the world around them. This world is your home. It is willing to gift you the ground you walk and the air you breathe. We must reciprocate with the same kindness and not with boundless destruction. Otherwise, we may not have a home at all. Guess old people don't change no matter what, thought Son Goku. Son Goku gave a gruff grunt, but it was enough of an acknowledgement towards Wukong. The aged Buddha quirked his lips into a small smile, giving light bounces from his tail keeping him up. He held out Nyoibo to Goku, who accepted the staff back in his own grasp. Even if you may not understand it, I am glad you recognize the importance in my words, Wukong said, sitting down before Goku. But there is also another matter at hand that I need you to deal with. Goku perked up. What's going on, Gramps? In my deep meditations, I was greeted with a new vision, Wukong intoned with dread. Son Goku widened his eyes in alarm. As a Buddha and a master of senjutsu, Wukong had the occasional ability to see into the future during his meditations via his deep connection to the very world. When Son Goku was first met with the concept of future sight, he was more than a little skeptical of a power not even Hagoromo possessed. Yet it was these same visions that Wukong knew of Goku's birth as an extraordinarily powerful being and the reunion with Kurama, Matabi, and Shukaku in Kyoto. He gave predictions of human history proving true with the rise of the new firearms in the world of weaponry and the slow subjugation of the new world. And now, with another vision granted to the aged Buddha, Son Goku had his utmost attention, and rightly so by the grim expression on Wukong's face. This was not a light one. Wukong elaborated. Something is happening upon Japan. Something terribly wicked is coming. I saw it erupt from the earth like a wound that would not heal and cast a shadow over the continent. If it awakens, I don't believe I can stop it. If this thing's so bad, then why don't you go inform Indra, or even Vishnu or Brahma? Goku suggested. No, Wukong denied, shaking his head. Inviting the gods can result in an even greater catastrophe to stop it. Tensions are already too much with Amaterasu's cold war against the biblical underworld. If Surya, Indra, or Earth forbid Shiva came in to stop it, the resulting clash can potentially destroy half the world. In literal terms, we would only have half a planet left after this. Son Goku had an inkling where this conversation was shifting towards, and he asked, "You want me to go over Japan and stop whatever mess will happen, right?" "Indeed," Wukong said solemnly. "You're the only one I can trust with this, yet I feel that I am sending you to your doom. My only hope is one part of the vision. At a single glance, I saw you, Goku, a great ape wreathed in crimson fur standing before the looming shadow. Besides, you were a nine-tailed giant cat made of blue flames. a tanuki commanding the wind and sands, and a mighty kitsune of crimson. All four of you being the last defense against this evil. He would have to have had brain damage if Goku did not recognize them to be himself and his siblings, though it intrigued the former Biju about a nine-tailed Nekosho instead. Goku held in a chuckle from breaking out. After all that has happened, he honestly never expected to play the part of a hero. Yet if his siblings were getting involved, who was he to miss out? All right, Gramps, I'll see what the commotion is about. Son Goku answered. If it's something ugly rearing its head, I'll just punch back into the ground where it belongs. Good, but one last thing, Goku, Wukong said, laying a hand on Goku's buff shoulder. Promise me this. Promise to come back alive and well. This old heart can't take the loss of his own family again. Son Goku smiled widely. Old man, look who you're talking to. It's gonna take the end of the world to get rid of me. Then I can hope for your success, Wukong said in a fatherly tone. There was no light of magic or the opening of a portal. Just a whistle in the wind and the Buddha had disappeared from sight. Across the land, the yokai would appear upon the top of a great mountain to resume his meditations. Meanwhile, the sage in training set his sights to the east, his grin still plastered on his face for what would come to be. Kurama, let's see what mess we got ourselves into this time, thought Son Goku. What to do? That was the prevalent thought running through Kurama's head. He was in a meditative position under the sakura trees of the palace gardens, deep in thought. A cup of green tea was held in his hands, giving Kurama further peace of mind. Even after all these years, the palace gardens were still his favorite spot. It gave him the closest connection to nature without tapping into senjutsu. There you are, Cocoon, the voice of the angel he knew. Turning around, Kurama was graced with Yasaka standing at the foot of the steps that would lead down into the garden. For a moment, Kurama saw the little blonde girl from the past who would stand in that spot always hollering her joyous greetings. Then that part faded away to the present and revealed this woman of unmatched voluptuous beauty Yasaka had grown into. It still left Kurama aghast, especially since the concept of feminine beauty was relatively new to him. Foo foo foo. Yasaka tittered behind a dainty hand. If you do that long enough, your jaw is going to hit the floor. Her words stunned Kurama in realization, having not realized his blunder, and clicked his gaping jaw shut. He turned his head away in a vain attempt to hide his embarrassment. No one would blame him if they were in his place treated to the sight of the golden kitsune. In a simple yellow kimono decorated with crimson flowers, Yasaka looked stunning like the rising sun as the clothes hugged her very curvy figure. A lesser man would drool at the sight, but even Kurama was starting to feel the effects. A vixen indeed. This brings back memories, doesn't it? Kurama said, trying to create some conversation. Certainly does, Yasaka replied with a coy smile. One of my fondest was tackling you into the pond. Really, that's the fondest memory you have of me? Kurama replied in mock offense. All of my memories of you are my fondest, Yasaka said barely above a whisper. Kurama found himself stunned to silence as he looked at Yasaka in a different light. Even the golden kitsune was surprised at her own response. Her cheeks colored a vivid red and turned her head to the side to hide the blush away. It proved to be a vain effort. Maybe I should take up on Shukaku's advice, Kurama thought. We should hang out tonight, Kurama announced suddenly. Yasaka eloquently responded, looking like a startled deer. Even her tails and ears suddenly appeared and standing on end. It would only be the two of us, Kurama elaborated. No guards to follow. No Amaterasu. Just us and the city of Kyoto below. At Yasaka's silence, Kurama started to get nervous but continued nonetheless. We can, properly catch up. I can tell you about my time in India, and some more about my adventures. I'll tell you more about the outside world. I'll even buy dinner if you want. Cocoon. Yasaka spoke, stopping Kurama from speaking as a smirk crossed her face. Are you inviting me to courtship? Kurama blinked. I think so. Maybe. Don't know. Yes? Then I accept, Yasaka answered after a long pause, turning back to return inside. I expect you to pick me up in the early evening. Kurama will not admit that he was not enticed by the slight sway in Yasaka's hips as she walked away. No, he was not succumbing to his body's primal urges no matter the fantasies his mind tried to force him to see. What he truly was concerned about was why he felt he trapped himself. So in his confusion, Kurama meditated back to distant memories when he was still sealed within Jinchuriki. He focused on his less-than-stellar memories of Kushina to the moment she had begun hooking up with Minato. The former Biju continued to sift through the moments to the moment Minato was asking Kushina to go on a date. Wait. It finally clicked in Kurama's head. Yasaka said that he invited her on a courtship. He assumed it was some royal way of saying hanging out. What Kurama now realized was that courting was actually a more fancy and old term to simply say dating. He had asked Yasaka to go on a date, and she answered yes. The thought was both nerve-wracking and exciting at the same time. Come on, Kurama, you can do this. The Biju tried to psych himself up. You fought your own batshit insane grandmother and had to sit through 3 lifetimes of imprisonment. You can do this. Just give her the best day of her life. No pressure. There was in fact a lot of pressure, later that day. Breathe in. Breath out. How did humans do this? Kurama wondered aloud as he ascended the steps to Yasaka's palace. Inhale. Exhale. Be calm. No need to freak out. I can do this. Kurama hyped himself up. I can do this. Come on, I am Kurama. What's a date compared to the things I've faced? He paused at the iron-clad red gates of the palace walls. Above him from the walls armed both with blessed blades and human weaponry of the current age were Tengu guards. Kurama stared back at their hawk-like gaze with equal measure, forcing himself to not scowl at the guards. I am expected, Kurama stated. We know, one of the Tengu answered, and the gates opened on cue. Our Majesty awaits. Be sure to give her a good time, but if you break her heart, well, break you, the other Tengu guard finished threateningly. Freaking stooges, but at least they're loyal, Kurama thought, making his way across the courtyard. It felt like hours rather than the scant few seconds it took Kurama to get to the fancy decorated doors that served as the main entrance into Yasaka's palace. He flexed his hands to get rid of the growing nerves that were making him hesitate. Kurama steadied himself with a deep breath and knocked on the door. Yes, came the sweet voice of Yasaka. Kurama gulped on reflex. He wasn't expecting Yasaka to actually be on the other side of the door. At least he thought he was going to get a few moments to compose himself. It's me, Yasaka, Kurama called. I am here for our outing together. He wasn't even given a few seconds before a reply. Instead, the door was almost yanked open inwards. What Kurama laid his eyes on left him with a hanging jaw. Apparently, the vixen wanted to go full out on the date. Yasaka had foregone her casual kimono and went all out with the most radiant cheongsam dress he had ever seen. Its silky texture reflected a golden hue to match the sunlight while embroidered with clouds of the same blonde color as Yasaka's hair. More than that was how much the dress really conformed to all of Yasaka's curves. The dress acted like a second skin, showcasing the fullness of Yasaka's breasts in their shape and size while still uncompromising in letting any skin show. Traveling down revealed the small of her waist and the flat of her stomach, yet expanded to showcase her tantalizing hips. At the lower part of the dress, slits were cut to allow a peek of Yasaka's bare legs and thighs. For the first time, the sight of feminine beauty had turned Kurama's brain to static noise. Cocoon, Yasaka called smugly. My eyes are up here. Kurama snapped to attention like a rubber band, but there was no denying that he had been staring rather intensely at Yasaka's figure. It made the golden kitsune all the giddier she was able to get such a reaction from Kurama with the beauty of her body. On a deeper level, it made Yasaka really happy that she had to cup her cheek to hide the blush. He thinks I am beautiful, Yasaka thought wistfully. With Kurama's attention back to Yasaka's face, he was able to take notice of the black eyeliner and pink dusting on her cheeks. Her hair was done up in 2 small buns that allowed a waterfall of her golden hair to fall down her neck to her shoulders. 2 pins of gold with emblems of suns on one end were struck into the buns of her hair to keep them in place. So, Cocoon, Yasaka said, sauntering up to Kurama and hugging his right arm, how are you going to spend the day with this beautiful woman in your arms? Kurama mumbled, his mind still trying to fix itself and not make himself a fool. You're putting in a rough spot. I mean, Kyoto is yours after all. You've probably been to every hangout spot in the entire city. You'd be surprised, Yasaka muttered with a sad edge to it. The entire time Kurama had kept his empathic abilities on the low, but even now he felt a deep sorrow from Yasaka buried deep within her. He had to school his face to hide the wince of sympathy, but underneath there was a familiar seething rage flaring up. Just why or dare it to be who is making Yasaka feel this way? And most importantly, can he punch them? Well, Kurama said, scratching his head. There's a high-end restaurant we can hang out near Lake Biwa. I heard they specialize in seafood from fresh catches. It's one of the things I haven't had in a long while. So, are you up for it? Yasaka didn't answer immediately as she gave Kurama an unreadable gaze. Kurama started to get into a cold sweat at the continued silence and assumed he had messed up with his suggestion. Damn, that was stupid. Kurama panicked in his head. Why a restaurant? Yasaka is served the best in all of Japan. What can a fancy seafood restaurant compare? That sounds good, Yasaka answered, relieving Kurama. I am always sheltered in my home, and I've been curious how cuisine among the common folk compared to what the palace cooks bring me. Yes, I would really like that if only so I can walk amongst the people I will soon be responsible for. I want to know what the outside world is like, even if it only is a small bit. Naruto, I will thank you forever for giving me your luck, Kurama praised. Shall we get going? Yasaka said coyly, tugging lightly on the arm she was embracing. We shall. Kurama replied with a smile and escorted his actual date across the courtyard and past the palace gates. Though Kurama suddenly stopped at the start of the stairway that led down to the city below. Yasaka blinked in confusion and looked to Kurama for answers. The crimson-orange kitsune's eyes were trained to the horizon where their destination lay. From Yasaka's angle and lower height, she couldn't see how Kurama's eyes shifted to the Mangekyo Sharingan to grant him a better vision of the landscape. You know, if we try to walk all the way to the place, we'll be burning a good amount of daylight, Kurama noted. I can make the journey in a much shorter time if I sprint all the way there. Truly? Yasaka queried, having never known anyone to go that fast. I am plenty fast, Kurama said with a knowing grin. It'd be real simple. All you had to do was hold on to me while I carry you. See, carry me. Yasaka squeaked. This time, her sly act crumbled down as her face flushed red. Her mind was already conjuring visions and sensations of Kurama's hold on her body. How he would hold her bridal style like a princess, and how his hands would hold her with such tenderness and softness as though she were the most precious thing in his possession. Yasaka's wild imagination was causing her heart to drum loudly against her chest. This is too fast, Yasaka thought in a panic. My heart isn't ready. Wait, Yasaka exclaimed, making Kurama back off. I am sorry, did I do something wrong? Kurama asked in worry. No, it's not that, Yasaka answered quickly. It's just that I would prefer to walk the way there. I know your way would be faster, but I want to savor this. I want to see the sights with you at my side, no matter how long it takes. As long as you're with me, it's all worth it, Yasaka added in her head. Okay then, Kurama replied with a disarming smile. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you're happy. Oh shit, was that the wrong thing to say? Kurama thought when Yasaka turned her head away. BA bump. BA bump. BA bump. BA bump. BA bump. Yasaka pressed her hand to her bosom as her heart started to hammer in her chest. She looked away to hide how red her face turned from embarrassment and the growing intensity of her feelings. Kurama stared in confusion at the strange behavior from Yasaka and wondered why her face was constantly going red. Are you okay, Yasaka? Kurama asked, leaning closer. Your face is getting red. You're not getting sick, are you? Let it be a reminder that Kurama was very much a stranger to feminine mannerisms. The closest experience possible was his time as a prisoner within Mito and Kushina Uzumaki, the latter of which kept him more contained. Instead of getting an answer, Yasaka renewed her grip on his arm with frightening vigor. Not only was Kurama suffering from her surprisingly strong grip on his right arm, but he was also trying to keep his composure despite the very big fleshy pillows fully embracing his bicep. Come on, let's get going, Yasaka said excitedly, tugging on the embraced limb. Hold on, Kurama called, quickly matching Yasaka's pace as they made their way down the steps to the city below. The walk together was silent at first. Yasaka took the time to admire the surroundings of the yokai going about their everyday lives. When they crossed the threshold that separated the supernatural community from the human world, she even took the time to study the humans themselves. She smiled watching the children playing together in the streets and enjoying the various sounds and smells of the folk working and talking. Soon, their lives will depend on me, Yasaka mumbled. Yasaka? Kurama wondered. She looked up to Kurama with a heavy smile. You know I am to become the leader of not just the yokai of Japan, but also the humans that live alongside us, even if they don't know it. Some in court say their lives are meaningless in importance, but I beg to differ. The way they go about their lives is not too different from ourselves. If you take away the obvious differences, is there really anything that makes us dissimilar? The lives of both humans and yokai will fall on my shoulders, and it frightens me if my decisions will endanger even a single life. To know that with a few words I could decide the difference between life and death like Shinigami. I don't like having that kind of power. Their walk was paused momentarily by Yasaka, whose nerves were making her body tremble. The mere thought of having that kind of power scared her too much to still her body. She didn't desire that kind of power as a leader. It felt awful to her. The shaking would have continued if another hand didn't gently grab her left hand. She stilled at the sudden contact but blushed a storm realizing it was Kurama holding her hand and so gently at that. Yasaka didn't resist as he guided her hand to his chest, where they were locked in a mesmerizing stare. Both of them did not realize their remaining hands were intertwined as well. Yasaka, Kurama began in a soft tone. These people, all of Japan from the human farmers to the guardian yokai, are so lucky to have you as their future leader. You're kind, intelligent, and have an iron will that will see through to everyone's protection. That's the sort of leader I would fall behind. Cocoon, Yasaka mumbled, her face almost steaming. Why you're just saying all that to make me feel better. Nope. Kurama laughed. We grew up together, remember? I know you better than probably anyone else, so I know for a fact you're the best one for the job. Yasaka couldn't handle the praise with a straight face. She felt her lips tug upwards into a wide smile but also her cheeks heat up like steam. Stop blushing, Yasaka would demand her cheeks, but they only reddened in fervor. Her heart raced like it was on a sugar rush and no thoughts could calm it down for it all went down a familiar road. That of her Kurama, her childhood friend that has grown into this hunk of a specimen, treating her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Yasaka could imagine those strong arms wrapped around her, giving her a safe haven from the outside world. This wasn't how it was supposed to go, it was just supposed to be an outing. Yes, it was veiled in an event of courtship, but an outing nonetheless. There was going to be some teasing at the most, despite putting her most risque dress the seamstress made on her orders. She just wanted to hang out with the one person she missed for so long before that. Now, Yasaka was feeling like one of those lovesick teenagers stuck in a crush. And wasn't that the crux of the matter because no matter how much Yasaka tried to hide it she had more than a simple crush for Kurama. Cocoon. You're embarrassing me. Yasaka mumbled. I am not supposed to do that, am I? Kurama asked, genuinely confused. What came out of Yasaka's lips was a mix of a sigh and laughter. She now realized that Kurama had no idea what he was doing to her. Kurama's natural charms were making her dance in his palm and he didn't even know it. A chill went down Yasaka's back as she momentarily imagined what Kurama would do if he was trained in the more flirtatious arts. He could probably talk Yasaka out of her clothes. Her face immediately burned as her mind plummeted to those raunchy thoughts. How it would be to experience his bare, muscular body practically shadowing over her form as she submit, ready to stop. No, must not lose focus. Must not become a bumbling mess. Not in public during courtship, especially in front of Kurama. Yasaka vowed to be dignified, the one in control even if her body betrayed her enjoyment in Kurama's presence. Let's get going, Yasaka ushered, pulling on Kurama's arm yet again through the streets of Kyoto. Meanwhile, she was ignorant of Kurama's silent pleas to lessen the hold on his arm. It was starting to really hurt. My arm needs air, Kurama whimpered in his head. Eventually, they left the confines of the main city and entered the roads leading into the forest. There they were given the majesty of the forest canopy hanging over them in branches of pink flowers and emerald leaves shining in the sun. It was here Kurama chanced to smile, allowing his senses to flow out to touch the natural energy around him. The lands of Kyoto, especially the forests, were so rich in their purity that they gave Kurama a sense of calm. Yasaka on the other hand took his serene smile with the way he admired nature around her. As a master of senjutsu herself, She also appreciated the beauty of nature in its untamed majesty. The smell of fresh water signaled them they were getting close to Otsu, which bordered the southern part of Lake Biwa. When they could hear the roar of the water beating against the beaches, they set their sights on their destination where a human restaurant was. For a village, it was very large in size due to its high trade of freshwater catch and famed cuisine. Already, Yasaka could take the fragrance of human cooking and could tell it held its own quality compared to the meals prepared by her yokai servants. But really most of her attention went to the lake itself. In truth, Yasaka had not ventured this far from the palace. She had never seen anything bigger than the ponds in the royal gardens. To see something a body of water as vast as a lake almost stretching to the horizon left her staring in wonder. Her eyes continued to gleam in excitement at how the lake reflected the sky perfectly and couldn't wait to see how it looked after dusk. It will be a full moon tonight too, Yasaka thought. So where is this human restaurant that has caught your eye? Yasaka asked. They did say it was at the water's edge, Kurama said, surveying the quaint village at the lakeside. Ah, I believe it is right there. Following Kurama's line of sight, Yasaka saw what appeared to be the most robust pier in the village where a single building sat with half of its foundations built into the pier. The pier was big enough for a whole line of seating available for anyone for a taste of the outdoors while Yasaka could clearly hear the bustle of human activity from within. Come, let us take a seat, Kurama said, now being the one to escort Yasaka. As they walked down the pier towards the furthermost table, Yasaka felt the stares on her body. She could not blame them. Kitsune women were one of the most beautiful in the supernatural in any form they take. Her body rivaled the beauty of goddesses around the world. Though Yasaka did catch more than a few lustful leers aimed at her chest and hips. It was an unsettling gaze, but they were quickly made null by the presence of Kurama, who carried himself in a more bestial manner. His figure cut a ferociously and intimidating aura around him that made sinful stares crumble apart since he was the one at her side. They know I am his, Yasaka thought, sinking just a bit more into her embrace with Kurama. After they did sit down at their chosen table, it did not take long before someone of the staff came over to take orders. Yasaka was nervous at this prospect, not used to actually choosing from a menu. She would make food on her own more than once, but now came the sudden fear of if Kurama were to judge Yasaka's cooking in this establishment. The Golden Kitsune couldn't bear the thought if Kurama were to suddenly find her cooking inadequate. How about I order for both of us? Kurama said. Yasaka let out a sigh of relief. Kurama had come to her rescue, getting rid of the burden of choice. However, when Kurama called the staff for their order, he merely pointed to something she couldn't see while holding up 2 fingers to gesture for 2 servings. Once the staff member had left with their menus, Kurama turned back to Yasaka to see her raised brow in confusion. What did you order exactly, Kurama? Yasaka asked. It's a surprise, Kurama said with a cheeky grin. Did it say something that Yasaka found her own lips trying to match that grin in amusement? Fine, keep your secrets, Yasaka replied. It did not take them long when their orders were brought in the form of 2 black bowls topped with a lid of the same color. There was only the steam that seeped from the sides that clued Yasaka on something that was hot, but any scents were kept within. The seconds felt agonizingly long until the staff member of the restaurant lifted the lids to reveal what was in. When Yasaka looked inside, she only blinked in confusion when her expectations weren't exactly met. Is this ramen? Yasaka thought. Itadikamasu. The Kitsune praised before clicking the chopsticks in their hands. Kurama. Yasaka said in a questioning tone. But the only answer she got was that same cheeky smile, and he began to pick out ramen noodles into his mouth. Yasaka looked down, still unsure about the broth. The ramen that they were served was not too different from anything she was served at the palace if she was asked for it or any she made for herself. The broth was a similar color, if only a bit on the darker side, and the noodles looked to be just a bit thicker, possibly due to them being handmade. The only thing that really stands out was the smell of a curious sauce within the ramen that smelled of fish and the floating bits of base swimming in the broth along with the chive and ginger. Oh, what's this? Yasaka thought when something caught her attention. It was a peculiar thing that floated in the broth with many others like it hidden by the noodles. She plucked a single one with her chopsticks and held it up in the open air to examine it. It was simple in that it was simply thin and white with pink swirls, and it had a texture similar to a sponge. With the grace of a noble, Yasaka brought it behind her lips and chomped down. Oh my. "Oh holy Amaterasu, this is really good. What is this tasty treat?" "Whoa, whoa, slow down," Kurama called. His voice broke Yasaka out of her trance and she realized to her horror that she was eating these flat sponges exclusively. She blushed in embarrassment at the break in decorum. "What is this?" Yasaka asked. "It's called a fish cake," Kurama answered, taking one for an example and twisting it in noodles and fish within his chopsticks. "It's very recent, and the recipe just came in from China. Delicious, don't you think?" "You had something in this," Yasaka accused. Yasaka would only make such a ridiculous claim if she didn't have a sixth sense for this. Something she developed when growing up with Kurama. Out of the staff in the palace and sometimes Amaterasu herself, only she knew when and where Kurama would sneak off to either between meals or at night. After that, it was simple for Yasaka to follow his chakra to where he trained by himself. No, this did not mean she was a stalker. That is entirely slander on any who claims so, even if it was a snickering sun goddess in question. "How so?" Kurama inquired. "You said this fish cake came about in recent years, far to the east," Yasaka said. "You were in the Far East, situated in India. And now for our day together, you come to this restaurant out of all of them that just had fish cake in their ramen. So what I want to know is, how did you start this?" "I could say that it involved me, boredom, and some experimentation with fish," Kurama said, a sad smile on his face. "But honestly, it's not my creation. I made the fish cake because it was to honor an old friend of mine. It was his favorite topping with noodles." It was not too far from the truth. One day, Kurama was thinking back on Naruto and all that he has done for him despite their short time together. As a way to honor Naruto's memory, Kurama spent half a year trying to recreate his favorite ramen topping. He eventually succeeded when Kurama was sure he liked the flavor himself and started making his own ramen just like he did. Eventually, Kurama decided to share the recipe with the human folk, starting with the denizens of India, and it continued to spread from there. Naruto would have done it in his place in order to share the glorious food that is ramen. "So you made this fish cake revolution throughout the entire continent for an old friend," Yasaka said. Her interest piqued. "He must be quite the friend." "He was," Kurama said lowly. Yasaka flinched back hearing the hurt in his voice, and it now struck her how much the passing of this person affected him. She felt a little sick of herself for unknowingly bringing up painful memories, but more than that she wanted to understand and learn about this person Kurama once called his friend. "This friend of yours that you met in India?" Yasaka asked, setting down her chopsticks to focus her attention on Kurama. "What was his name? What did he help you with?" It took Kurama a few seconds to realize that Yasaka thought he was reminiscing something that actually happened in his time with Asura and not his old life. That sort of secret was reserved for himself and his siblings because otherwise, he would actually believe him. However, there was a way to spin the tale of his past in a more believable way. "His name was Naruto Uzumaki," Kurama retold, his eyes going distant, "and he was a human. A simple human that got me through my darkest moments. I've always had problems with my rage, but during my stay with Asura, they got worse as I got older. You know, teenage years being emotional hell and all that. There were just days. Centuries," Kurama added mentally, "where I just nothing but this murderous rage. It was consuming me, and it got horrid when I watched the humans. How they needlessly warred with each other for religion or ideals. But it was the greed that got me. The earth gave them plenty to live, but all they did was take and take and take. I feel it in the earth whenever I use my senjutsu. The rage the planet feels at humanity squandering its gift of life. I agreed with that rage, and all that hate was aimed at humanity. There were more than a few times where Asura had to contain me when the malice of the earth took me when my rage was too much. Then came Naruto. A human who stumbled upon the sacred grounds. If Asura permitted, he could have walked into his palace. Naruto found me there, brooding you could say. Once I saw him, I threatened him to leave these sacred grounds lest I eat him like a tasty treat. I even grew into my fox form to scare him away, or I really was going to kill him. That's how much I hated humans. Do you know what he did instead? This blonde weirdo jumped right on top of my snout, stared me right in my eye, and gave this goofy smile as if I weren't threatening to kill him. Then he said, "You know what, I am coming after all that hate of yours." I stared at him in disbelief for a few seconds, then promptly blew him away like an annoying dust bunny. "That was rude of you, Kurama," Yasaka admonished. "Humans are not deserving of such treatment." I know, Kurama placated. It was a phase I was going through. Humans didn't exactly paint a good impression on me in the world at large. And Naruto proclaimed to help me with my hate. Really, this one human had the audacity to come up to me and claim that he could fix my hatred for his kind. How wrong I was. Naruto was stubborn. Like a lump of steel, he always kept coming back to the same spot, even waiting for me. For the next week, he kept coming back with bowls of ramen to share, even if I didn't eat. And every time Naruto talked to me, even as I tried to glare at him to death. Then I started to notice the little things about Naruto. How he had a care for nature as he walked, making sure to not step over any blooming flower in his way. Any creatures that came his way, he offered his own food for their benefit. It was slow at first, but I soon realized that this human was different from the ones that I hated. And that maybe there were perhaps humans like him. That their immortals simply have no greed to hold them and devote their lives for a better, brighter future instead of mindless slaughter. Then Naruto started talking about his dreams. He wanted to spread an idea of cooperation for the world, not just between the human nations, but also the supernatural as well. He had a dream of every living thing on this planet working together for the future. More than anything out of all things, he wanted to end the cycle of hatred. A very bold human indeed, but it was something that gave me a new hope for humanity. This was a human I respected truly. Sounds like an upcoming Buddha or saint from how you describe him, Yasaka commented. Yet you say this Naruto isn't around anymore. No, Kurama said sadly. At a village he frequently visited, there was an outbreak of a fire caused by a supernatural criminal. A mad spirit, if you will, that had festered since the ancient empires of India. I was sent there to defeat him and the fire was put out, but that was when I was hit by the news of Naruto's passing. He had risked his life saving children from their burning homes and stopping the flames from spreading throughout the forest. He perished by doing what he wanted, preserving life that was sacred to him. As Kurama spoke, his mind brought up the vivid memory of Naruto's soul dissipating into nothingness. He was not ashamed to shed a tear brought on by the deep sadness. To Yasaka, her heart went out to Kurama, having glimpsed the hurt of losing a friend. I don't even know what to say, Cocoon, Yasaka said. I am sorry you had to go through that. There's nothing to forgive, Yasaka, Kurama said. It would dishonest Naruto if all I did was dishonor his death. There are a few things he left for me before his death. One is a promise I made at our last meeting. He made me promise that I find people precious to me and protect them with my life. And who are these precious people? Yasaka said, more than a little curious. Well, I had already someone precious to me I want to always protect long before I went to India, Kurama said, taking a cup of tea to his lips. You. Was it bad? He found it amusing how Yasaka spat out her tea at that moment. She quickly righted herself and wiped any of spat out bits of tea, but now there was certain shyness to her demeanor now. Yasaka's face burned scarlet continuously and she found it hard to make eye contact with Kurama. For a moment, Kurama let out his empathic abilities and saw the mess of her emotions, but what really stood out was a sense of longing and anxiety. Of course that makes sense, Yasaka said, though her eyes spoke a bit differently. Of course, you would protect me. I am one of your precious people because I am your oldest friend. Friend. That's something Kurama treasured in his new life. It was one of Naruto's greatest motivations alongside his need to keep promises to those friends. He wanted to live up to that. And certainly, he did make friends in this world, not just with Yasaka, but also with Asura, Amaterasu, Buddha, and his reincarnated siblings. Yet he tried to put the word of a friend towards Yasaka. He found it dissatisfying? It wouldn't be the first time he thought of this. Kurama always thought of Yasaka when he was away. At first, it was always because she was the first friend he made in this world and officially the only other person besides Naruto to gain his friendship. Yet somewhere along the line, something had changed. Every time he thought of Yasaka, it always came with that indescribable warm feeling that was almost addicting. Because when trying to put the word friendship with Yasaka, Kurama wanted more. Was it wrong to have this urge, this desire? Kurama didn't know, but he could resist and made the lunge forward. His soul yearned to do so. It's more than that, Kurama confessed. To me, you're more than that. You're the most important person in my life. Yasaka squeaked. Her whole face took on the like of a cherry, but underneath the embarrassment, Yasaka was panicking. This was not what she was planning. This was never supposed to happen. She just wanted a day just to herself, serving as a glimpse of a fairer life she could only dream of before fully resigning to her duties. Yasaka had once envisioned a life with her Kurama, but such a choice was not a part of her. At the very least, she was fine with adoring Kurama from afar. Knowing that she had his friendship was enough for her, if painful to her heart. But that was not to be. If Kurama's saying was true, that meant what she felt for her fellow kitsune was mutual. Perhaps he did not understand it, but it was there nonetheless. A desire to grow more than friends. Yasaka should be relieved. No, happy beyond compare, if it were a better world. Only this was the reality where her duties called far more than her personal happiness, and it is why she could nothing except a terror coursing through every part of her body. It felt like her world was cracking apart. No, 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 Yasaka's mind screamed in turmoil. Wait, 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 wait. This isn't supposed to happen. I love him, but why does he love me? I am not good with this, Kurama said, more than a little anxious as he reached into his shirt fishing for something. But maybe this will show how much you mean to me. Finally, his hand returned, now holding a small bag, and from it pulled out a set of earrings. Yasaka immediately noticed the master-level craftsmanship, surpassing most of any treasures of the palace. On the mystical side, there was a small presence within them that was foreign to her supernatural senses. Both earrings contained a gem encased in black stone, holding either a sapphire or a ruby. Kurama held out the one encasing a ruby towards Yasaka. These earrings were once worn by the married blacksmiths Mo Yi and Ganjong, Kurama explained. It said that they wore one for each of them so that the pair was only complete as long as they were together. Kurama then proceeded to take the sapphire earring and wear it on his right earlobe. Yasaka's heart started to quicken with two warring emotions. On one side she was pure joy, but that was overshadowed by the crushing reality of her situation. She silently begged Kurama to stop so that she doesn't force herself to hurt him. And it's why I offer you this half of the set as I wear the other, Kurama said, still holding out the earring for Yasaka. As long as you have this, I will always be by your side. No matter how much the world works to keep us apart. How she wanted more than anything to have this, but she was trapped. She couldn't call it off or else all of yokai will know the wrath of Susanoo. So as she ducked her head shadowing the upper half of her face, Yasaka suddenly pushed Kurama's limb back with the earring. While Kurama stared in shock, Yasaka slowly got out of her seat. I am sorry, Kurama, Yasaka stated, her voice a mere whimper as tears cascaded down her cheeks. But it can't be this way. It just can't. Kurama panicked. Yasaka, stop chasing me, Yasaka continued, taking steps back. Just forget about me. Yasaka turned on her heel and ran. That was the only saving grace to hide the rivers of tears coming down her face and raining down on the ground as she went, leaving a flabbergasted Kurama. The reincarnated Biju was so confused. His hand was outstretched, but the words to call Yasaka back died in his throat as questions arose in his head. Why did her emotions suddenly spiral into a storm of sadness, regret, and so much pain? Why was there so much pain? Why was she crying? Did he do something wrong? Was he the reason she was crying? Is this my fault? Kurama thought in a broken manner, collapsing into his chair. It was more of a statement towards himself. Perhaps this was due to happen. Just another long list of unfortunate events in the life of Kurama, both as Biju and yokai. A staff member approached, giving Kurama a pitiful look. That seemed harsh, the man spoke. Sorry, it didn't work with your lady-to-be. She looked worth it, sir. If you want, the meal's free. It's all right, Kurama replied. It was almost horrifying to the onlookers just how broken Kurama sounded. No tears may have swept down his face, but this was the lowest Kurama ever felt. You got jacked. That was the first comment Matabi voiced as soon as she met her brother Son Goku. She found him just when they had entered the city of Kyoto. It was a wonderful surprise that the first soul of the supernatural Matabi met would be her own brother. The years had done really well on the monkey yokai, now sporting the body of a juggernaut yet carrying the grace of a seasoned fighter. As expected, Son Goku beamed with pride at Matabi's rather loud comment about his stature. He even added to this by lifting up his right arm and flexing the bicep muscles that bulged to a size that could squeeze a mon's head off. Please praise my might more, Son Goku said, continuing to flex his muscles. The ladies sure like it. His comment was not untrue. Even now, off to the side, there was a group of human women that were looking at Son Goku's body with hungry eyes. They were in awe at the powerful temple he proudly showed off, and some giggled with red cheeks as many fantasies filled their heads. For Matabi, her wide-eyed stare turned to a blank look now seeing Son Goku's immense pride as she remembered. You ruined it, Matabi deadpanned. Son Goku harumphed. Suppose not everyone can handle my awesomeness. Your ego is putrid, Matabi shot back, fanning at the air. Oof, you wound me, Son Goku said in mock hurt, but hey, you don't too bad yourself. You could say that, Matabi agreed, fully knowing of her body's new sexual appeal. There's also a little surprise I wanted to spring on Kurama when I get the chance. I shudder in fear of what it might be, Son Goku jested in fake horror. He received a slap to the shoulder from Matabi. It was strong enough for the yokai to feel the sting, but not enough to be truly taken at offense. So, how do you suppose we find our big brother? Asked Son Goku. That's easy, Matabi said, pointing to the royal palace in the distance. He's bound to be there for his special lady. It was lucky timing when the pair arrived in Kyoto. As soon as they stepped into the plane where yokai presided, they felt the lingering chakra of their elder brother in the air. They half expected to still be in India, so it was more of a welcome surprise to discover he had come back here. True, Son Goku said with a knowing grin. Come on. Let's see if we can get the jump on him. Side by side, the two siblings walked through the streets of Yokai City. What made this part of Kyoto unique was the coexistence of both humans and yokai, even if the former did not realize it. Only a small majority of humans realized who they lived in, and those included the clans under the Shinto gods or the rare yokai human married couples. They paused when they picked up the chakra signature of the youngest of their siblings. Homing in on it, they came to a back alley where an interesting scene greeted them. It was a gathering of vagrants and delinquents of the city, like Ronin or street brawlers, surrounding a single spot. Despite the big crowd, there was a gap big enough for Son Goku and Matabi to see the source of the commotion. Come on. Are you even trying? This sarcastic inquiry came from the very small form of Shukaku. Without his iconic tail and raccoon ears, he looked like a clone of Gaara with only sandy brown hair and golden eyes. That sinister smile was what really made him recognizable to his siblings. He was sat at a small table in an arm wrestling contest. His opponent in question was a beast of a man with monstrously bulging muscles bigger than Shukaku's head and a physique that towered over men even while he was sat down. One of his hands, big enough to grab Shukaku himself in a single grip, was locked with Shukaku's own, and failed to make the former Biju's arm budge. Thick veins bulged on the limb as muscles strained to push down the smaller yokai's hand. For the man, he was in the struggle of his life. For Shukaku, he was having an average Tuesday in the town. Son Goku and Matabi could see the lack of care he had in the arm wrestle in the way he was casually checking the nails on his free hand. "Hey, I am bored now," Shukaku announced blandly. With the ease of shredding wet paper, Shukaku slammed down his opponent's arm to the other side. Not only was the table they used reduced to useless splinters, but the loud crack of bones signaled how shattered the large mon's wrists were. As the human cried in agony at his ruined appendage, the tanuki casually walked out of the alleyway, arms in his pockets, till he noticed his two siblings. Gold eyes widened in surprise at the sight of a burly monkey and a beautiful nekosho till a large grin spread his face. "Yo, Son Goku, Matabi. How's it hanging? It's been way too fucking long." "Yeah, it has," Son Goku said, but, what was that back there?" "Just some street thugs thinking they're tough shit," Shukaku said with a wave of his hand. "But enough about me. What about you? I mean, have you seen yourself in the mirror, bro?" Evidently, complimenting Son Goku's masculinity was a way to preen him. His concern over the earlier scene was completely forgotten as he soaked in the praise. He puffed his chest up to show his sculpted body, added by a few flexes of his pecs. "And you," Shukaku said, turning to face Matabi, "damn, look at what 10 years can do to a gal." Matabi smiled sweetly. "Why yes. In fact you got boobs," Shukaku exclaimed as if he has witnessed a miracle. "Big boobs that I could bury my face in. Not like those back-breaking BA donkers that Golden Vixen is sporting, but those are some serious honkers themselves." That smile on Matabi's face turned frosty and an ugly tick mark bulged on her temple. She seized Shukaku by the collar of his tunic and shook him the ferocity of a woman who seemed particularly scorned. Is that seriously what you say to your sister after 10 years, you overgrown rodent? Growled Matabi after thoroughly shaking his head. I mean, it's the truth. Shukaku slurred. Matabi sighed and let go of the tanuki, allowing gravity to plummet his limp body on the ground till he got his bearings. And then there's me, exclaimed Shukaku, pointing fingers at himself in a dramatic fashion. Look at me. Cursed to be a damned shrimp. I am as small as my last Jinchuriki when he still had mommy issues. I don't think you have the right to complain when you can body someone 5 times your size, Son Goku commented. Semantics. Shukaku said. Point is, it ain't fair that I got the literal short end of the stick while you guys get to be like that. And don't get me started on Kurama. I've seen how the ladies turn the heads his way. Fucking pretty boy. Matabi and Son Goku couldn't help but sweat drop at Shukaku's rant over the one sibling he focused his rivalry on. They took it in stride as they continued their walk through the streets of Kyoto. First, they walked through the roads of the human city, where the mortals and secret yokai human couples were turning in for the night. When they reached the entrance, space folded as the trio was taken to the realm existing on a plane of reality slightly above the mortal world. There, the city of yokai was bustling with activity as shops lined the streets and lanterns burned brightly held up by ropes connected to buildings. Without the mortal world's eyes on them, the reincarnated Biju let out their yokai traits. From Son Goku's tailbone emerged a monkey tail covered in fur the same color as his hair, and monkey ears grew from the top of his head. Matabi stretched her voluptuous body as she let out one of her 9 tails and her pair of cat ears. Then there was Shukaku, who was now sporting a long sand-colored raccoon tail as long as he was tall and an extra pair of ears resembling that of said animal on top of his head. So how do we find the missing part of our quartet? Matabi chimed. Oh, that's easy, Shukaku answered. By now, he should be done with his date with Yasaka. They will be at the palace or at least on their way there. Kurama, on a date? Son Goku snickered. Oh, now I've heard everything. Kurama only knows how to brood and grumble. Matabi hummed in thought. Who knows, perhaps Ni-san got lucky and they're spending some extra spicy time for the night. Son Goku and Shukaku looked at their sister in bewilderment. Matabi's dirty, if offhanded, comment got the reaction she wanted when their faces cringed as their mind drew up images of that. Shukaku at the moment widened his eyes and looked at the towering palace in the distance. Fuck, for all we know Kurama's drowning himself in Japan's biggest bosom instead of hanging out with us, Shukaku exclaimed. Son Goku facepalmed. Is that really what you focus on here? Come on, if we hurry Yao. His cry of pain was caused by Matabi sharply yanking Shukaku's tail. Looking back at his sister, he was slightly cowed by the close-eyed stiff grin she was aiming down. Not to mention the bulging vein on top of her temple. Shukaku gulped, knowing when to cut his losses seeing that kind of expression. Yeah, I'll stop that now, Shukaku said meekly. If you two are done, let's get to finding Kurama in this maze of celebratory, Son Goku said. Speaking of, doesn't it seem to be more festive than usual? Oi, don't look at me, Shukaku replied when he was the center of questioning looks. All I know is about some high-end people and a wedding. That's all I can say. I can't stop snobby bozos and the sticks up their asses. A wedding, huh? Matabi commented. That's sort of what forced me here from my home. It's a good time for a vacation because of an upcoming wedding. They never did say whose wedding it is, but it would have to be someone very high up on the social ladder to get everyone this excited. Maybe one of the gods of this land? Son Goku wondered. No, it's very improbable for deities these days to wed each other, Matabi informed. If they get into any relationships, they don't like to broadcast it. Anyhow, it's the reason why I am here now. What about you, Son Goku? The successor to the Monkey King raised a brow. Pardon? What brings you here from Asia? Matabi repeated. Shukaku doesn't need to answer since he lives here, and we're going to ask Kurama when we get to him. So why are you back here, Son Goku? The carefree smile on the yokai dimmed to a flat line, and he resisted letting it become a frown. In his mind, Wukong's premonition repeated in his head of the great dark calamity that shall befall Japan soon. It was a vision where the pivotal characters were himself and his siblings that would determine this side of the world's fate. An internal debate went on in his head if he should divulge what he knew. But before he could speak, he was interrupted by Shukaku. "Hey, there he is!" exclaimed Shukaku, pointing a finger ahead of them. "There's Kurama, right there, come on, let's go." And, oh, holy fuck. Worry grew in Matabi and Son Goku at the haunting tone coming from Shukaku. Following their brother's gaze, they found a section of the street across from them that was untouched by the crowd. More accurately, the yokai of the festival could not stand the air that permeated with a negative aura that chased them away. A familiar red haze of chakra polluted the air from the spiritual illness of dark emotions that emanated from the one being that stood in the open space. There stood Kurama, his face shadowed by his red hair, walking through the streets with heavy footsteps. Crimson eyes glowed from the shadows of his face with turbulent emotions, none of them good. None interfered in his path and wisely stayed away in order to avoid the corrosive chakra surrounding him. Shukaku was knocked out of his stupor by Matabi's roughly grabbing him by the collar of his shirt. His eyes were inches away from Matabi's heterochromatic green and yellow. "Explain this," Matabi demanded. "I have no idea," Shukaku exclaimed with a hiss. "He was fine earlier today. I don't know what could." "Oh. Oh," Matabi repeated. "Oh, what? You know that date I mentioned?" Shukaku said, getting a nod from Matabi and Son Goku. "By looking at him, I don't think that date ended so well." "Huh?" Matabi responded eloquently. "But, how would make Kurama into that? Isn't this a little over?" "I must stop you right there," Shukaku said with a serious tone. "When you think of love and Kurama, they don't fit each other in the same sentence. When you exclude us and Pops, there has only been one person that he opened up to after hating the human race for so long. Then comes Yasaka, who's become the closest thing to his heart. What I am saying is Yasaka is the first thing Kurama has been absolutely smitten with, and he looks like he got dumped. That would be soul-crushing right there." "Shit," groaned Son Goku. "It's unbelievable, but damn. I haven't seen Kurama this worked up since Dad died." "So what do we do?" Matabi said. "Let me give you the best advice ever," Shukaku, making careful steps back. "We give the guy some space. He's in a rough place right now." "How do you get so introspective anyway?" Matabi wondered, following her brother's lead. "There are a lot of talents none of you know I have," Shukaku said. "One of them is being a people person. I am awesome that way." As they made their distance away from Kurama and deeper into the festival, Son Goku was troubled by his thoughts. Wukong's premonition spoke of rising darkness in him and his siblings being the pivotal players. But nothing about it didn't say that one of them was that calamity. And knowing what a Kurama going back to his darker tendencies. Perhaps he was overthinking it, but Son Goku didn't want to think of Kurama being the cause of a dark calamity to threaten the world. With Kurama, guest wing of Yasaka's palace, it was hard to smile. What memories used to make his heart lighten instead made Kurama's frown deepen. He did not know the haze of chakra he produced loosened from his control. His legs moved almost on autopilot to where he roomed in the palace. The entire way Kurama was afraid of seeing Yasaka again. He didn't want to see the tears on her face or imagine whatever hateful words would come his way due to how he messed up. More importantly, Kurama was afraid because now he wasn't sure what he would do if he saw Yasaka again. The only thing he did know was that it wouldn't be any good. He couldn't bear to hurt her, but apparently, his presence seems to do so as well. "Stop chasing me." Why else would Yasaka say that? It's why in his room right now he was packing his clothes into his satchel. By morning, he will leave Kyoto and go wherever the wind takes him. Suppose in that way he would be fulfilling Yasaka's first wish. Just forget about me. Unfortunately, he couldn't do that. Kurama can never forget her, much like how he could never forget his father in Naruto. She had gone that close to his heart, perhaps even more so. But now he will never really know just how far that went. If his absence made her life better, then it will be done. Even when he wanted to turn a new leaf, Kurama would always be the monster that would spread misery. The Kyuubi. The strongest Biju. The fox demon. "It's better this way," muttered Kurama, tightening the lace on his back to close it. His senses, dulled by his turbulent emotions, could not help but detect the sheer divinity that was coming his way. Unlike looking at a mortal, sensing a god was much more intense. One didn't feel their life force, but the force of nature that was bearing down on him. He knew this signature well from the sheer heat assailing his senses and the golden brightness in his mind's eye. His answer was proven correct when his door was blasted into cinders, allowing in Shinto goddess of the sun, Amaterasu, into his room. And she looked. Well, happy was obviously off the counter. Hate was also looking a little weak there too. Adding to whatever wrath Amaterasu beheld with her glowing eyes and gnashing teeth were also the flames of literal solar energy that licked off her form. From head to toe, they burned around her body with the radiance of gold with highlights of black flames that Kurama knew from his previous world. He had a good guess why Amaterasu barged in here. She was Yasaka's mother in everything but blood. She most likely wanted vengeance for Yasaka crying back home because of him. He may as well take it. "Why are you leaving?" Amaterasu exclaimed. Surprise shook through his mind, giving Kurama some clarity from his hazed mind. No, he couldn't have heard that right. Why is she mad about him leaving? Shouldn't she want him to leave after what he did? Yes, Kurama answered without even turning his head toward the deity. Yasaka made it clear of that, so he'll be leaving tomorrow. Instead of lashing out, Amaterasu threw her hands up onto her head. She gripped at her ebony tresses, tempted to pull at them, and started pacing around the room, further confusing Kurama. "Yasaka, you adorable idiot, he's your ticket out of this mess," Amaterasu murmured before speaking to Kurama with more composure. "Kurama, please, you can't leave." Now Kurama was getting irritated. "Excuse me, what makes you think that I am going to stay?" "Damn it," cursed Amaterasu. "This is all a huge misunderstanding. Please, you have to stay. You have to." "I have to what?" Kurama interrupted, red chakra shimmering around his body. "Stay in a city where I'm not wanted anymore. No thanks, I am done. You can say that I'll be living up to Yasaka's wishes since my presence here seems to upset her." "You're wrong," Amaterasu exclaimed. "Yasaka doesn't want you to leave. If the world were fair, she would want you to be at her side for all of eternity." Kurama did not respond, instead staying silent. His eyes were downcast to his packed bag ready to head off on the road. The cloth strained under his fingers, clenching till the knuckles turned white. "Damn it, Yasaka, you had your chance to tell him," Amaterasu hissed before taking in a breath to steady herself. "Kurama, Yasaka loves you. Loves you more than anything in the world." That was when Kurama's world simply stopped. Not only did he feel the hands of time seemingly freeze around him, but Kurama also believed that the world just stopped making sense. His solemn eyes were wide with unspoken emotion. "You're lying," Kurama said lowly. Even in the tone of his voice wasn't convinced by the words that left his own lips, and the goddess called on his bluff. "You know I am telling the truth," Amaterasu exclaimed, pointing an accusing finger. "I've raised her since she was a babe. I know how she thinks, so I know there hasn't been a day where she never thought of you since the day you left. In every step she took in her life, Yasaka pined to have you at her side. She never stopped loving you, and it only grew through the years. Kurama, you're the most important person in her life." "Then why?" Kurama said, his voice softer than he wanted it to be. "Why did she push me away? Why is she crying? Stop chasing me. Just forget about me." "Because she feels she has no choice in the matter," Amaterasu answered, and the oppressive aura of her power lessened. "Not because of this damned scheme." "What are you not telling me?" Kurama pressed. Amaterasu sighed. "Yasaka is trapped in a forced marriage." "Forced?" Kurama snarled with a dangerous edge. "Explain, now." The crimson chakra around Kurama's body now started to whip out as wild as the growing rage boiling within Kurama's veins. Amaterasu felt the raw rage carried within the mystical energy like a haze that wanted to make her ill. If she were a lesser being, Amaterasu would have felt her emotions fluctuate to a darker, more vicious nature from the chakra she breathed in that was trying to infect her. "Yes, forced," Amaterasu said. "No matter how much they can butter up as an arranged marriage blessed by the kami. The fact of the matter is Yasaka has no choice in the matter. She's miserable because of this farce." "And Yasaka get out of it herself," Kurama accused. "What kind of stakes would strong-arm her like this?" "Because the consequences if she doesn't go through with will threaten her people, both yokai and mortal," Amaterasu informed. "It's a whole complicated mess of political bullshit. But to dumb it down, she's marrying one of the Himejima clan, one of the clans of Japan that make up our core supernatural forces, and more importantly a powerful clan of mystic users not under my jurisdiction. Not marrying them means their abandonment in defending the people from outside forces, and I can only do so much on my own. Then why don't you get her out of this and strong-arm these clans to not abandon their posts? Kurama growled in frustration at these shitty excuses coming his way. You're a goddess, for crying out loud. Strong-arming people into your service is part of your shtick. And here comes the crux of the matter, Amaterasu said with a hiss. The matchmaker for this farce is caused by none other than my brother, Susanoo. He not only has the loyalty of the Himejima and other mystic clans but is also in charge of most of our military. He made it very clear to Yusaka that if she tried to back out or I tried to do so, he would take all of Japan's military power with him and wouldn't lose a wink of sleep if we were invaded and razed by another faction. He wouldn't care. He never does. It's a sort of threat I would call a bluff centuries ago, but I wouldn't risk it because of the current situation. The Cold War you have with the underworld, Kurama surmised. You show any amount of weakness, and those nobles will act on it. How did it come to be this way anyway? Here it was Amaterasu that cringed. She turned her head away, more hesitant to say than anything else before. It was over a decade ago when you were just a boy, Amaterasu explained. I was in a meeting with Serafal, trying to establish some good ties with the underworld after having Japan isolated from the rest of the supernatural world. I thought, I hoped, that maybe it was the start of something great. A new age of cooperation. But then I felt the lives of two I considered my children suddenly snuffed out, followed by an explosion of chakra I never imagined to exist. It was there I found the home belonging to those I raised since children turned to ruins caused by a rogue peerage, and the only survivor being their only boy who I only held when he was a babe, who I named Kurama. Kurama wasn't expecting that. What happened to his birth parents in this world was a tragedy. He felt genuine anguish from the memories of his reincarnation. Yet he had no idea how the death of his parents played such a part in this Cold War. It was certainly a surprise to know that Amaterasu gave this life his original name. It almost looked too fishy to be a coincidence. Can you understand the rage I felt? Amaterasu continued, her voice shaking. The anguish that plagued my heart. They had the audacity to kill Tora and Sarah and make you an orphan. They dared to spill blood on my domain when we were in the middle of diplomacy. I was done thinking straight. I was done with the murdering. So I banished the devils. I barred them away from ever taking a single footstep on Japan's soil. I practically spat in their faces, and the nobles of the underworld in their pride did not take it lightly. And now it all comes to this. So, it's all my fault then? Kurama said, if I didn't. No. Amaterasu cried, her solar flames filling the whole room before they diminished. No, you were never at fault on that day, despite the consequences that followed. How could it? You were just a child whose family was violently ripped away from him. If there is one at fault, it's me, Kurama. It was I who spurned the devils to threaten us this way. And it was my rivalry with my brother that he used this to create this so-called marriage to take away my daughter just to spite me. It's because he'd lower himself to target those close to me just to get at me, and... Amaterasu stopped when she was met with the full force of chakra that had finally rumbled to the surface, with Kurama just managing to keep it in this room. The wood groaned and cracked under the pressure of the otherworldly power brought on by the sheer vengeful rage that burned beneath Kurama's skin. His form was almost shrouded in crimson chakra. His eyes spun in their pinwheel pattern of the eternal Mangekyo. His lips curled to reveal gritting sharp fangs, and his whisker marks thickened. In his mind, it all made sense. All the despair and deep sadness he felt from Yusaka. The reason why she was so miserable. The reason she was crying when she should be laughing and smiling. He foolishly thought he was the cause of it, that despair. But now it finally made sense. All he needed was a target on the source of it all. Susanoo. If there was ever a name that he hated more than Uchiha, that would be it right there. Tell me, Amaterasu, Kurama growled, his right holding on the hilt of Muramasa, who do I turn into a bloody smear? Amaterasu didn't answer, too caught up in the power open to her. She could hardly believe it. How could any yokai possess so much chakra and be so dense at that? When she first felt Kurama's power firsthand, she knew it was larger than any yokai, like staring at the great ocean to the east. It was massive, but ultimately something Kurama had little finesse and control in. But now the past could hardly compare to the apex standing in front of her. Not only had that reservoir of power grown since then, but it was also under a tight lid of Kurama's will. Even the chakra she felt shimmering off Kurama's body was simply a flex to what he truly held. So much chakra, Amaterasu thought in shock. I almost feel like I am drowning. I never thought to see such a powerful life force. Not even from Tamamo or Inari. His life essence could fuel a whole world. He can do it. He can definitely defeat him. There is only flaw to undoing Susano's plan and ending this farce without putting Japan in danger, Amaterasu informed with a hardened look. In his world, Yasaka's marriage can be broken without consequence if any challenger can defeat him in combat. Not only freeing Yasaka from his clutches, but also gaining the allegiance of the military, the clans under his control, and... Good. Kurama interrupted. Amaterasu stuttered at the abrupt interruption, but there is still... Don't know, don't care, Kurama exclaimed. If beating this bastard means Yasaka can truly smile, enough said. My only question is, when is this wedding? Tomorrow morning, Amaterasu answered, but I think there's... The goddess suddenly found herself pushed out of the room and into the hall. Before she could enter back in, Kurama made a single hand sign and a wall of wood grew to replace the door. Amaterasu was tempted to blast the wall but stayed her hand. No, I think I'll leave that tidbit as a surprise, Amaterasu said, disappearing in a flash of light. In his room, Kurama sat on the ground in a meditative position. Muramasa was rested on his lap and he took controlled breaths. Soon, he attained his calm and his chakra was put on tight lid. He looked down to his blade and unsheathed an inch of the steel. Kurama smirked. Looks like you'll get your taste of a god's blood. Muramasa